keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Jimmy, I am well aware on this Friday. I am well aware of the fact that what I'm about to say I have said several times, but I do think it's important to repeat. So can you bear with me for a second?
That's why they pay me.
So you get paid?
Sometimes.
They didn't tell me that was part of the agreement of working here.
The genie finally get you the money that he owes you?
He's got a weird installment plan over like 40 years, so it's not great.
Oh, so he's the Dodgers.
Exactly like that.
Well, yeah, and with the genie finally agreeing to pay the compulsive gambler. It's just like the Dodgers, right?
Yes.
Now,
where's my translator?
The couple of things to go over this morning, okay? First, the Indiana State game last night was awesome. It was awesome. I got to sit with Good Jimmy's dad, which was fabulous. Egglestons are great people, and it was an awesome atmosphere. And look, kudos to Seton Hall for that environment, that moment, and not getting rattled. There was one guy sitting behind the Seton Hall bench that I think might have wagered his entire tuition on the game. He was stressing like it was unbelievable. I thought he was going to get ejected from the game as a fan, a student, but we will get to that. And there was good and bad that happened last night at Hinkle Fieldhouse, and we'll get to that. But also, I want to begin with this, and I'm asking for I am pleading, I am requesting, I am reaching the olive branch to the majority of our listeners. Okay? And I'm going to use an analogy I have used many, many times before. For the better part of my career, when I was a young guy getting into media, and Ed Sorensen was the guy that I was kind of shadowing under and working under. You know, it's really interesting because in this market, you've got two guys in J&V and myself that are the best of friends that went to the game last night at Indiana State to watch Indiana State, and we get along great. And we've been confidants of one another for quite some time. But we have similar paths in the fact that I came up through the ranks under Ed Sorensen, who is mega talented and demanding. And he came up under the ranks of Mark Patrick, who was mega talented and demanding. And Mark Patrick and Ed Sorensen were rivals of one another. I think respected rivals of one another, but certainly rivals of one another. So I grew up shadowing under, hearing about the pitfalls of Mark, and John grew up the same with the pitfalls of Ed. But here we are, right? And one thing that Ed Sorensen had said to me when talking about rivalries like that is he said, Jake, if you work in this market, what you need to understand is that if you're talking about Indiana, you will never appease the Purdue fan base. And if you're talking about Purdue, you will never appease the Indiana fan base. And they will only hear what they are convinced is your bias against their school and your love for the other. And I've always tried to be conscientious of that to make sure that we appease, accommodate, and welcome all listeners. And I'm being serious when I say that. Now, when I was a kid, I know people get tired of me saying that, but that's how long it's been since Indiana's been nationally like on the forefront. I was a kid. When I was in the 8th grade and Indiana went to the Final Four, then when I was in 2002, I was working it. But in 87, when I was a diehard, dyed-in-the-wool IU fan, and IU went to the Final Four, back in the days of VCRs, I taped everything. I taped all the coverage. I taped the news stories. I taped the live shots on Bourbon Street of people from Channel 6 or Channel 13, wherever it may be. I absorbed and soaked in and embraced every aspect of Indiana being in the Final Four. And in 2002, because it was such a surprise run, the same was true to a great extent. It was tremendous fun.
Were you using TiVo back then?
Not TiVo. I was working at Channel 6, though, so a lot of beta tapes.
All right, okay.
Now, for Purdue, I'm aware of this fact. People have asked me all the time that are Purdue fans, why do you talk more about IU than Purdue? And I always use the deli analogy. Listen, I like Purdue, But if I run a delicatessen and I love pastrami, but 75% of my audience requests turkey sandwiches, I better always have turkey available. And when it comes to the two in this town, 75% of the people that listen to this program are fans of Indiana University. 25% Purdue University. I mean, there's obviously Butler and Indiana State and the other teams, but you get my point. So for that, it would be unwise, seemingly, to cater a show to 25%. It would. But I ask Indiana fans this. I ask them for a day and for this week to let Purdue have its moment, because Purdue has patiently waited through all of those days and weeks and months and years where Indiana had their due. And it would be very easy to turn off the radio today if you're an Indiana fan. But I ask that you listen to our show, enjoy it, and have fun with it, and be well aware of the fact that Purdue is not just an Indiana story. This is a national story happening in our backyard, because Purdue is one of, if not the best, programs in college basketball, with a likable coach and a guy who was a top 400 recruit, right? The only stars that Zach Edey saw as a recruit was it was the fact he was from Canada, where you see more stars at night. That's it. The only stars he got. This is the story of a group that got punched in the face, came back, brushed themselves off, did not complain, bought in, play as a team, worked their tail off, listened to their coach, and now the redemption tour continues. And today we're going to celebrate it. We're going to talk to Mitch Daniels, who was the president of Purdue University during a lot of this rise. Coming up here in just about 20 minutes, we're going to talk to Brad Miller, who's out in California. And I think, Eddie, did we wake Brad up? Did you check?
I don't know. I haven't heard back from him yet, so he could still be sleeping. You never know. He could set that alarm for 12:57 and then wake up when I call him.
9:57 out there, which only increases the odds of that possibility. Brad Miller at 1 o'clock. 1:30, Billy Keller, who was involved in 2 of Purdue's Final Four teams, played in 69, coached in 80. 2:30, Mark Monte. He's got a cool book out, not only about Purdue does he have written, but he also has a really cool book that was in a closet for 65 years, and I'll put it that way. And he didn't start writing it 65 years ago, believe you me. But we'll talk to Mark at 2 o'clock, and then Rob Blackman at 2:30. So plenty to talk about for the Boilers today. And I hope, and I know it's a big ask, I do, and I'm not saying that flippantly. I hope Indiana fans can use it as motivation and fuel to say, you know what, maybe this is what it's going to take to wake up Indiana basketball. Let's let Purdue have their moment, and then let's go. Now, as for Indiana State last night, Jimmy, you watched the game, right?
I did indeed, Jake.
With 9 minutes to go in the game last night between Indiana State and Seton Hall, I was reminded of the scene in Rocky, the original Rocky movie, where Rocky's fighting Apollo. Apollo is basically seeing it as an exhibition fight. Now, I'm not selling Indiana State short by saying that Seton Hall saw Indiana State as just an exhibition. I think Seton Hall was well aware of how good Indiana State is. I think the whole country was well aware of how good Indiana State was. And you have to give both Seton Hall and Indiana State credit in the fact that they looked at each other and looked in the mirror. And I think I talked to some Seton Hall fans before the game. There was absolutely a mutual respect amongst both programs of, we are the 2 flag-carrying members of the snubbed by the NCAA tournament committee. And I don't think that either one of those programs last night or either fan base thought they were the one that should have gotten into the tournament over a Virginia or Colorado State without bringing the other with them. I think both thought to themselves, we should have gotten in the tournament, but so should have these guys, and vice versa. So during the game, Seton Hall, though, they were physical and they were so fast and so long. You could tell that their length was an area that Indiana State in the early aspects of the game, when they tried interior passing, just was not, they were not used to how quickly the lanes collapsed, the passing lanes collapsed. But Seton Hall got not once but twice, Jimmy, developed big leads, and every time, including heading towards the half where Indiana State was down 11. They come back, they tie it at half. Then in the second half, they get down close to double digits again, and they come roaring back again. And with 9 minutes left, Indiana State takes the lead of the game. And the crowd goes crazy. And I thought about that scene in Rocky where Rocky is down on the canvas. Adrian finally comes out. Her curiosity's gotten the best of her. And she sees Rocky sitting face down. And she has this incredulous look on her face of both hope and despair. And then all of a sudden, Apollo, who is celebrating, looking at the crowd, turns around and realizes that Rocky's getting up. And Apollo has this look on his face like, wait a minute, I don't know how much more I have left in me. I really have to try to knock this guy out again? And that's exactly what Seton Hall looked like. And then Indiana State took advantage of that, roared it out to the 7-point lead with 3 to go, and then made terrible decisions down the stretch. I get it. It's hard when you run an offense that is catered towards quick open threes for an entire season to suddenly pull out of that. And I think Josh Schertz was even telling them, like, just run our offense. Let's go with what's gotten us here. But, Jimmy, they missed not 1, not 2, but 3 opportunities to salt clock.
And they did it in pretty much the same way each possession down the stretch. Let 10, maybe 15 seconds come off the clock, take a three-pointer, and then you allow Seton Hall to get out and run what they want to run. I mean, you're up 7 with under 3 to play in this game. And more often than not, that should be good enough. That should get you to the finish line. But that's an interesting point. They were a team all year that was high tempo, quick offense, score as many points as possible. And perhaps that is what happened. They could not get out of their own identity to the point of, hey, slow it down. We can still go in an efficient manner, but it doesn't have to be the breakneck pace that they've done all year. Either way, is there shared blame on Indiana State as much as there is credit to be given to Seton Hall? Absolutely. Because, Jake, you were there. That atmosphere, it might as well have been at Terre Haute where that game was played.
For sure.
So to be able to take yourself off the mat and close on a 9-0 run in a de facto road game for a national title, of course, the NIT variety, but still an NIT national championship, all the credit in the world of the Pirates. That said, this is what we talked about yesterday, and this is the way the cards are dealt in sports. Rick Mount said it yesterday. Sometimes you forget about the guy that came in second. You especially forget about the guy that came in second, the NIT. Like, I can't name for you the last 5. I can't name you the last 2.
By the way, to be fair, Rick Mount actually said you always forget the guy that comes in second.
He did. You're right. I'm trying to be a little nicer about it,
right?
But he's right. You do. You always forget about who came in second. And it's frustrating because this is what happens when we label things with team of destiny. Like Purdue, I feel like it's the same thing. It's an exercising of demons. And they're a far better team across the board than Indiana State is. Let's not get things twisted there. But there's those same parallels ever since the tournament started. Really, ever since Purdue fell to Fairleigh Dickinson last year. When the immediate narrative is, oh, look what happened to Virginia when they lost to a 16 seed. So maybe Purdue's going to do the same thing. And they have. And now it feels like, oh, well, if it happened for Virginia, it's going to happen to us. And then when you aren't able to deliver, and especially when you aren't able to deliver and you know the ramifications of it, where you're going to have players into the transfer portal. And Josh Schertz is headed to St. Louis.
It would appear, right?
It would appear so. In all likelihood, that's where it appears things are trending. Like that, all of that mixed with a 9-0 gut punch to close, it sucks. There's no other way around it.
I saw a Josh Schertz report this morning. Can't remember which outlet it was. It was a TV station, said it was a 6-year contract worth $12 million.
Yeah, saw that earlier today.
It's funny because I had somebody who I like a lot and is pretty dialed in the Terre Haute side of things, sent me a thing last night that said, I think there's a chance that Schertz stays. Some money people have really stepped up. And I'm like, yeah, they haven't stepped up that much.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
I
mean, what's he making at ISU? 350, 4?
Yeah, we chatted the other day. Barely 4.
So they get somebody to chip in an extra $800,000. Okay, well, you're still $800,000 short, right? I mean, $2 million though seems lower than, does Josh Schertz now all of a sudden? Here's the wild play.
Well, it's a longer deal than I think we thought, right? That's why I think it fell below 3, is because it's 6 years now instead of like a 4-year deal.
So it's $12 million, right?
Right.
But here's the thing: do you wait to see what Arkansas might throw at you? Do you use that as the card? If St. Louis is the place that he wants to go, if he loves Emo's Pizza, he loves driving on I-70 and stopping at the Effingham and McDonald's that still has McRibs year-round and going back and forth, right? And he loves T-Ravs on the Hill and the Cardinals. St. Louis is where he's going. If that's the case, does he still not say, you know what? I saw my name floated with Arkansas. Arkansas's, I could probably get away with leaking out there that Arkansas is discussing me the $4 million a year range, so maybe SLU will give me 3.
I would. I mean, there's gamesmanship to be had in any, whether you're a player or coach, whatever. Yeah, if there's an opening somewhere else, you throw it out there. For those that didn't see it yesterday, and this is another big shift in the Big Ten. Not that they needed any more sizzle on the conference expansion, but Eric Musselman, longtime head coach last 5-6 years at Arkansas, gets the job at USC after Andy Enfield left for SMU. So there's more ramifications there as we get further down the line into the offseason. I know that's, 6 or 7 months away from mattering, but yeah, Musselman takes the USC job. That's another player in the Big Ten. And
that does feel weird, doesn't it?
Yes, it feels very weird. I had a conversation with a buddy last night about that. I was like, man, Must-Bus that's his nickname. I know you yell at me sometimes, stuff like that. The Must-Bus is headed to USC. And then my buddy's like, man, that's weird that it's the Big Ten. Like, it's very odd. It's going to take a while. What do you think? Before or after week 6 of the football season that it starts to get normal for people? Like midway point of football season next year, before you're like, you know what? I'm kind of used to.
I mean, it's still
Big Ten, Oregon.
Probably, I think a full season. Maryland, to me, Maryland was such a rooted and strong part of the ACC, and yet for me, like, I automatically think Maryland now Big Ten. Nebraska, I still think of as its great moments being against Oklahoma, Colorado, Big 12, Big 8. Now, Eric Musselman, by the way, $4.2 million is what he got paid at Arkansas. Now, Eric Musselman, when he arrived at Arkansas, had a better and more proven resume than does Josh Schertz. But if Schertz's name is floated with Arkansas, and if he can get them to talk to him, and they're not going to pay him $4.2. Let's say that they offered, and who knows if they even were going to offer him. But if they were going to throw around $3 million to Josh Schertz, doesn't that mean that Schertz then can go back to SLU and go, Absolutely. You know what, I need $275?
Absolutely.
Not if he's already agreed to the contract with St. Louis.
But it has to be pen to paper.
And signed it.
It has to be pen to paper.
If he hasn't signed it, I'm saying.
If he hasn't signed it, then why wasn't he more linked to Louisville? Because there was a lot of buzz from Louisville that Josh Schertz could have been a candidate there.
My assumption would be that Louisville probably wanted to make maybe because of the transfer portal, wanted to make a hire before Josh Schertz's season was complete. Or Schertz himself just didn't want Louisville.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you got to have somebody in there at the start of the portal
fair point.
season.
I get what you're saying. What, is it possible he said to Louisville, hey, I've already got a job in St. Louis? Maybe. But I think Louisville is seen as a job, even though I had said, I've talked to coaches 20 years ago, though, that said they thought Louisville was the best job in the country. I think Louisville now is a job that some coaches see as having more staying potential than an Arkansas or a St. Louis.
Well, there's been too many hiccups the last 2 hires in terms of them getting back to where they wanted to be.
Right.
When you see a name like Chris Mack falter the way that he did, all of a sudden you're like, oh, man, I know that was 2 cycles ago, but it starts to lose, to your point, tarnish and lose the luster of what the job is and what you can build it into and how hard it might be to do that.
You guys, by the way, are good people to ask, okay? How do you view Arkansas?
The basketball job?
Yes. The program, the Arkansas basketball program.
I viewed it as, and I don't mean to show my age here, I viewed it as nothing more than another stepping stone for other better SEC schools in basketball prior to Musselman reinvigorating it.
You think of not as a job, the program itself. You think of Arkansas basketball as a, nationally speaking, a top 10 job, top 20 job, top 30 job, top 50 job, 50 to 100. Where do you see it?
I'd say top 30.
Okay.
But post Musselman, I don't think I viewed it that way. Like for reference, what do you view Mississippi State's basketball job? Where would you put that?
Like 40 to 60.
Okay, that's probably where I would have put Arkansas prior to Musselman and what he built there. Like, I just view it as another SEC school that's like, okay, it's a football stronghold, right? I'm not worried about the basketball program there. Like, if they're on the schedule, I'm like, okay, let's take care of business. Should be a W.
So you don't consider and I don't mean that because I know it's been a while, you don't consider the Nolan Richardson era?
Again, I'm probably showing my age there a little bit. I don't mean to fully disrespect that program. I don't view them as a.
No, I'm saying it as not as an indictment to you,
sure,
as a barometer of the recency of where people see Arkansas. Like, I would consider Arkansas a top 15 to 20 job, probably top 15. Truthfully, because
have you viewed it that way the last 5 years?
Yeah,
like before that transcends Musselman's arrival is what you're saying.
Yeah, because of now, to your point, Jimmy, I think when Musselman got there, they were the flames or the light of the Nolan Richardson era was beginning to flicker out almost permanently, right? I mean, it had been a while. They had, I think, was it Pelfrey that was coaching there? They had some guys that chased it a little bit, but Arkansas's had proud traditions through the 70s and then into Nolan Richardson and then the 40 Minutes of Hell and Scotty Thurman and Corliss Williamson and, Lee Mayberry and Todd Day. But those players are 25, 30 years ago. And so
you go Stan Heath, Dana Altman was there for a cup of coffee, then John Pelfrey for 4 years, Mike Anderson for 8, and they really didn't do much during that time, the 11 to 19 tenure of Anderson, and then Musselman brings it back to national prominence the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they upset Kansas, was it 2 years ago? I mean, Musselman clearly had gotten them back into the mix and conversation of a legitimate program.
And because of his personality, I think for people my age, he looked like a fun guy to play for. Like, it looked like a fun, high-energy program. And I'm not saying that's the only thing to judge whether or not a program is successful or not, but there was a certain energy about Musselman and like rebuilding or bringing Arkansas, I guess, back into the national forefront, which is what he did, that I think caught the attention of a lot of people in my age group.
Yeah, I mean, Musselman clearly is one of the young, he's not even young anymore, but I mean, young-ish. Musselman's perfect for USC because he's basically infield, right? I mean,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or infield. I mean, he's a young-ish, full of energy guy that would be fun to play for, that it's a wide-open style. I mean, it's perfect for USC. Absolutely perfect. But Arkansas does have some riches because you can recruit into the Memphis area. There are good players out of like Texas and even in Little Rock that you can get. So I don't know how we got off on that. Because for Josh Schertz, I do think that Arkansas is something you look at. But Arkansas comes with it more of a pressure expectation than does St. Louis University. St. Louis University in St. Louis is a lot like, quite frankly, Butler or Indiana State here. Butler basketball, there's nobody in Indianapolis that like hates Butler, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Butler, when they caught fire with Brad Stevens, the alums finally were able to push their chest out like, this is awesome. And then the rest of the city got behind it because it's like, they play in a great field house and it's cool and it's right here in the middle of town. Like, we're all in. And they do it the right way and everything else.
At the time,
SLU
it's our
is the
George
same
Mason.
way.
Let's get behind it, right?
What's that?
At the time, it was like, it's our George Mason. Let's
Correct.
get behind it.
And SLU, in the city of St. Louis, you have the hierarchy is the Cardinals first, the Cardinals spring training roster second, the Cardinals potential 53-man pull-up third, or call-up third, and then the Blues, and then like Missouri basketball and football if they're decent, a little smattering of Illinois basketball, and SLU. That's it. So you go there and you go 20-10 every year, you're probably there for 20 years. You go there and you make a Sweet 16 run, and you're throwing out the first pitch of the Cardinals game. They bump Fred Bird, and they're like, okay, Josh Schert's going to throw out the first pitch, and everybody's excited. And then you parlay that into an opportunity at Illinois if Brad Underwood leaves, or Indiana if Mike Woodson leaves, or whatever it might be. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But good for him if in fact the report is true. But last night was a ton of fun. It was electric. It was disappointing. It was disappointing because it was right there to be had, and they just made a couple of decisions in terms of not running out shot clocks where you're like, man, like, work the clock down a little bit. And I get it. Avia had a good look. I mean, he was straight on. He had a really good look. Don't kid yourself. And if he hits that shot, we're leading the show with the audio of it. I get that. But unfortunately, he didn't hit it.
It's life in sports, unfortunately.
That's right. Speaking of life in sports, he was the president of Purdue University. He was also the governor of the state of Indiana, but he is a huge sports fan and is probably excited about the way the Major League Baseball season has gotten underway. I'll explain what I mean by that, but we will talk about Purdue in the Final Four, and we'll do it with Mitch Daniels next.
Business.
I have not looked. Did the Dodgers play a late game last night?
I did not check. Eddie's usually my baseball go-to guy.
They did not play last night. There was only like 4 games yesterday.
That is good news for our next guest, because had the Dodgers played, he'd be having an extra cup of coffee this morning after staying up late to watch the Los Angeles Dodgers. But he doesn't need any coffee to be energetic about what's going to happen tomorrow night in Phoenix, because from 2012 until 2013, the Honorable Mitch Daniels was the president of Purdue University. That, of course, after his term as governor of Indiana. And he joins us on the program. And, Mitch, I guess I should begin by saying boiler up, right?
Well, unless you want to sing the North Central fight song first, but yeah, that's a good place.
I can do that too, right?
I can still do it, but no, boiler up is the right place to start, of course.
Hey, let's go back to this, because this. I was thinking about this on the way in, and I don't think that it ever became anything more than just like a ripple in the pond, but there had been times where people, Purdue fans that I know, were like, I don't know if Matt Painter's the right guy. They get beat early in the tournament and da-da-da-da-da. Did you, when you were at the helm of the university, and I realized there were bigger fish to fry, academically speaking, with the school, but did you start to hear some of those rumblings, and just what was your thought if you did?
Yeah, I heard them. You get, we got 500,000 alums. You got every flavor of opinion on every subject. So, yeah, I heard them. I always thought it was completely wrong. Purdue basketball has not had too many bad years. My first year actually was one. We might have been last in the Big Ten for 1 year, but never changed my mind at all. Matt Painter is, I think, the finest coach in the country is in multiple dimensions, and I think, surely you guys can see it in your world. There's a lot of people out there who have nothing to do with Purdue University who are rooting for us, in large part because they've seen the high character of Matt. They've seen the kind of program, that doesn't exist too many places anymore. And, I always felt so lucky to be in the job I had with a guy like that there, that you could be proud of him and his young man every year.
Oftentimes, Mitch Daniels, we find leadership in moments that are not on a stage or with a spotlight on it. And you can see it in the behind-the-scenes moments. Was there a specific moment that jumps out to you, maybe at a practice, maybe in a back hallway, where, not to say you ever had doubt about Matt Painter, because you didn't, but was there ever a moment where you saw a specific thing take place and said to yourself, that's why I want that man representing the university that I'm the president of?
Well, there were a lot of moments that I saw as I saw his players, and I knew that the way they were conducting themselves at Purdue was a reflection of his values. They were going to class, they were graduating, they were doing things in the community. So there was all of that. I also know, without going too far out of school, that we were talking one time. I think he had brought a recruit around for me to visit with, and I won't mention the school in question, but I knew that somebody else we were looking at was looking at that school, and Matt said, I just don't talk to people after I find out they're looking there, because that other place is going to do things that we're not prepared to do, and that made a great impression on me. I thought we're going to win, but we're going to win the right way with this guy.
Mitch Daniels is our guest. Mitch, I was wondering if you could take us back, and there's a great piece on this event in the Indy Star and how you've gone from not really having any connection Purdue when they were last here back in 1980 to, how your life has changed, how the university has certainly changed in that time span since they have now punched another ticket to the Final Four 44 years later. If you could take us back to that night and how you wind up watching Purdue UCLA in 1980, and then how your perspective and everything around it has changed over that 44 years.
Sure. One thing that hadn't changed, I've been a fanatic sports fan all my life. I've always been, for anybody from Indiana, when I lived and died by the IU teams that were so great. Purdue, when they've been great, it didn't matter who it was, Butler for sure, Valpo, had a couple moments. And so there was no departure on my part to want to go to that game, and I was very disappointed when the Indiana team, Purdue, didn't get there. But obviously, when I hired on at Purdue, I told them I was sitting in front of thousands of people on the day they announced it. I was being interviewed actually by our graduate, our alum Brian Lamb, who founded C-SPAN, and he asked me some athletic question, I think about coaches' salaries or something. And I told him, I said, listen, when we're playing, I'm all in, but I'm not going to start dissing IU or any other schools because, as far as I'm concerned, we're all Hoosiers together here, and when any of them is succeeding, as long as it's not against Purdue, I'm feeling good.
And here's the thing. The hope would be that, 5% of the IU fan base sees the same thing and cheers for Purdue this weekend, right? I do think that there are people that are, though, right?
Listen, I promise you it's more than 5%. I can't tell you how many IU folks, I've run into or heard from who said, this one time it'd be okay. I think it's back to that thing I was talking about. I mean, look at the team we got. Look how many Hoosier kids are on this team.
Well, that's it, and including Matt Painter, right? I mean, I think Painter is a huge part of that.
Back in 1980 and for a long time after, I thought part of the great excitement of college basketball or sports was, in a loose sense, it was our kids against your kids. Look at the IU championship teams. They were full of Hoosier kids that we had watched in high school and watched them for 2, 3, 4 years. At college, there aren't very many programs like that anymore between, the portal and one and done and all that business. We are kind of a throwback, and I think that the combination of that, Matt's personal qualities that people have now seen, there's a great piece somebody sent me from the Washington Post this morning, John Feinstein, who wrote the book, about the season on the brink with Coach Knight and all, really positive about Matt, and he talks about last year's disappointment, no whining, no excuses, and America has seen that. I think you roll that together, and you got a lot of people I think would feel good about them winning, including a lot of very loyal IU fans.
Mitch Daniels, by the way, is our guest. He was the 12th president of Purdue from 2013, the time that he began, until 2022. One of the things about this Purdue team, to touch on that, Mitch Daniels, is the fact that I love, and I've talked on this show, about, you've got Caleb First that was a Mr. Basketball and a big recruit and saw a lot of minutes as a younger player. And this year, as the rotation has changed, his role has changed a bit. But all of those players on that roster seemingly are okay with where they are right now. They understand the bigger picture, and they're willing to do it for the better good of team. That is becoming more and more rare in college basketball, especially in the NIL era. Can Matt Painter sustain this level of selflessness within his program while competing at the same level?
Well, first of all, I think that's a very astute observation. I agree with it completely. By the way, it's not just Caleb First. Ethan Moore, we have two guys who started most of the last year who aren't getting hardly any minutes, and you don't see them complaining, and quite the opposite. So can he sustain it? Let's all hope he can. In fact, let's hope maybe somehow that other schools decide to try it too. I think it would. It's not been good for college athletics. The stampede really into professionalization, I'm afraid, is going to hurt it long term. And you really want somebody, hopefully more than one somebody, to demonstrate you can do it this way and succeed.
Are there ever times with, the constant wind of change in college athletics between NIL and now having, college games being involved in the sports gambling apps, are there ever times where you think to yourself, maybe I did get away from this at the right time because of the just insurmountable changes taking and challenges every day?
Well, I don't know if I'd quite put it that way. I'll never feel that good about having gotten away from Purdue. I think, I love the job and the students and everything about it. But I understand what you're asking. And, yes, I would not have been very comfortable. It was already becoming that way 4 or 5 years ago. You could see this if you went to the Big Ten meetings as I did, you could see this stuff coming, and unfortunately, nobody found a way to head it off. Our dear friends at the NCAA didn't, and now I don't know if you can get the toothpaste back. I really don't.
Mitch, what would you say you're most proud of from your tenure as president of Purdue?
Well, I think the rising reputation, the school finally getting some of the recognition it deserves. I'm proud that we're 30% bigger than we are, and yet the quality of the students has gone up with the size. Obviously, I feel good that we I think are providing the highest value. I always said we're out to provide the highest value, higher ed at the highest proven value. And, it costs less to go to Purdue now than it did in 2012. And yet we think the quality of the education has steadily gotten better. So, I think it's all of that. But I also like what the school represents. Matt Painter, the athletic program, is a great example, but to me, it's just typical of the value system at Purdue. We protect free speech. We believe in free inquiry and the dignity of each person. And I think that's reflected across the university, but certainly in this basketball team.
I was thinking about this also, Mitch. Mitch Daniels is our guest. If I were to think about the Mitch Daniels tenure at Purdue, I think of a couple of things. One of them is obviously the tuition freeze, right, and continuing to make it affordable for in-state kids, notably, to go to Purdue. The second would be the globalization of the Purdue brand, between the naming of Purdue Global and the opportunity for people from all walks to be able to get an education there. And then the third would be the consistent growth within the basketball program and the movement towards excellence. And then I thought to myself, all of that seemingly is embodied, is it not, in Zach Edey? Like, Zach Edey represents the Mitch Daniels presidency because he's not from the United States, but he came here. He didn't, he got NIL essentially, but he's with the program that the big money is not the issue. It's about consistency from a financial standpoint year in and year out, but rather just simply getting better and growing every single year. And the way that guy has grown as a player, to me, is the model for what any college student, whether it be an athlete or just a finance major, should aspire towards in their 4 years. Is that a fair summary?
Sure it is. And, of course, I have a special relationship with Zach because people are always getting the two of us mixed up.
That's right.
So
the height is so similar, right?
Yeah.
The two respective faces of Purdue that are right there on the same plane.
I told him that one time. I said, people always asking me, "Aren't you Zach Edey?" No, I mean let's face it, he has been thrust into his excellence has thrust him into the national spotlight, and when that happens with some college athletes, it reflects great on their school, as he has, sometimes not. But no, we couldn't have asked for a better visible representative of the Purdue program, we got a lot of others of those, but of course Zach's the one that America has seen the most of, and always will remember.
Speaking of being in national spotlights, Mitch Daniels, will you again entertain the thought of running for a national elected office?
Well, good news, America. No, it's astonishing to me how often that continues to come up. I mean, there was a time when I gave it a hard look, and but all things in their time, and so if there was a moment for that, whether it's basketball or public life, timing's everything. And if there was a moment for that, it was a little while back.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you about this. The transition, and I know it was before you were there, but just the transition from going to Gene Cady into Matt Painter, keeping that within the family. Mike Babinski's, I think, understanding of what all of that means as well, and having the Purdue spirit in leading the athletic department. Can you touch on or elaborate for our listeners, Mitch Daniels, about the cohesiveness or the familial feeling that runs through Purdue athletics and notably the men's basketball program?
Well, if people can't see it, I'm not sure how I could explain it to them any more plainly. Let me put it this way. I've had a very strong feeling in business, in public life, and at the university. I've always told people, if somebody gives you a job of top responsibility, succession management is the final exam. You can do a really good job of whatever it is, but if you don't at least try to make sure to turn things over in strong shape, into strong hands, then you don't get an A. And I feel, for instance, extremely good about the transition that we did in my job. I could have gladly and I think capably stayed a couple, 3 more years, but I saw an opportunity to secure a successor who I think is just already proving spectacular. Look what happened this week. We brought a semiconductor plant, the biggest new investment, 1,000 new jobs, high-paying jobs to Indiana. And, that's, to me, that's part of Purdue's responsibility. And so when I look back at models of who did that really, really well, you can't find a better one than Gene Cady to Matt Painter. Somebody who understood the philosophy, the values of the program, came up in it, and just without a hiccup or seamlessly transitioned. Fantastic example. People in business should pay attention.
Would you ever entertain working for or heading up the NCAA?
Well, they've got a new president. He's a very able guy. No, I mean, I think that they're in great shape, and I'd probably have my last 24/7 job, and especially not interested in one where you have to chase all over the country every day. I've got some grandchildren to look after now.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. If the national championship game will be played on Monday, I know that there's a game to be played in between with a very capable North Carolina State team who's a good story in their own right. But Doesn't it seem, Mitch Daniels, only fitting that on a day when the entire world turns to Indiana to see what happens with the moon, that night an Indiana school who had a guy that walked on it wins the national championship?
Yeah, there's a story in there somewhere. You bet. let's hope that the last word. Let's hope the next giant leap by Boilermakers happens 72 hours from now.
We're all a basketball kind. All right. Hail our Panthers is the first line. Do you know the second line? Hail our Panthers.
Hats off to thee. Yeah.
Yes.
I know it all.
To our colors.
Some things you don't forget. The basketball games and songs like that.
That is correct. Mitch Daniels, it is always a pleasure. Enjoy the games and boiler up by all means.
Thank you. Boiler up.
All right. Mitch Daniels, again, the president emeritus of Purdue University, former governor, of course, of the state of Indiana, and a really good conversation. He is a diehard Dodgers fan, by the way. And his father-in-law was the second baseman of the Chicago Cubs in the game where Babe Ruth called his shot at Wrigley Field. So those are his baseball connections, and obviously a basketball fan and a sports fan through and through. Really good conversation. By the way, Brad Miller going to join us just about 10 minutes from now. Do we know that he's awake?
I think he is.
Okay, so I know that he was going to go turkey hunting.
Let's see how many times I have to hit the dump button today.
Well, we'll see if he's awake. We'll check in with Brad Miller and possibly talk to him here top of the hour.
Want to explore using Mitsubishi Electric?
Thank you to Mitch Daniels, and appreciate those who commented that they enjoyed the interview. He has always been cool. Always been a good guy. And that goes back to when I was working at WIBC and didn't know him at all. And I remember once Terry Stacy was out, and so Sherry Daniels filled in, and it was a very fun conversation. And I appreciate that he remembers the North Central Fight song. That's pretty cool. Jimmy, speaking of his Dodgers and Major League Baseball, have we checked the race for beer? Brad Miller, by the way, coming up about 8 minutes from now, assuming that we wake him up.
I didn't realize, in regard to the race for beer, by the way, that Eddie's Marlins.
Would you stop, please?
No, real quick. I know it's
so
really.
So just so people are all aware, if you were not listening to this show earlier in the week,
where have you been?
Thank you. We do a thing with each and every sport at the beginning of the season where we take the teams that are in the bottom, say, third of the prognosticated wins for the year, and we each pick one that we think will then have the most wins of those three. Eddie got the first pick, and he went with the Miami Marlins. I had pick number 2, and even though among the teams that I could have selected were the Chicago White Sox, who I'm not a White Sox fan, but Shannon and I have an odd tradition where we go to a businessman special White Sox game every year, and it's one of my favorite days of the year.
95-degree weather, so that you have to go.
It was
seek
108
shelter in the
last year. It was
concourse.
unbelievable. But we drive up, we have the same parking spot, we walk in, we sit in the same spot. It's great. I love it. So I thought maybe just for sentimentality, I should go with the White Sox, but I did not. I figured since it's a race for beer, I'd go with our winter tradition where we go every year before Christmas to Milwaukee. I went with the Brewers. And, Jimmy, you went with?
The Cleveland Guardians.
The Cleveland Guardians.
Now, to my earlier comment about Eddie Garrison and his Miami Marlins in this sentiment, even though he's a Reds fan, but he picked the Marlins. They started 0-7. They're now 0-8. I did not realize those first 7 were all at home. They were all at Marlins Park, and they got skunked. It's a brutal start here.
So they were up by 3 against the Pirates and lost. Up by 3
Indiana
again
State
to the
was
Pirates.
Up 7
and
last
lost.
night. They didn't win. I mean, what are we doing?
They were up. Yes, I was watching that game at Twin Peaks. They were up like 5-2, and they lose 8-5.
You're watching at Twin Peaks?
Yeah.
Was the girlfriend with you?
Yeah, it was her idea to go there. Ironically, so not mine.
I actually, to be honest with you, I think I told you guys one time. Late, Shannon and I were coming back from something late, and we were hungry, and she's like, they actually do have good food at Twin Peaks. Let's just go there. So we went there together. They have fabulous food, and the beer is ice cold. Okay, so
anyway, Marlins lost again. They're 0-8.
I know. They're 0-8.
Okay, 0-8's fine, Eddie. You can say that. I know that, like Mark Boyle's, that you have to pay homage to the big poster in your bedroom, but
no,
0-8's fine, or 0-8's
yeah,
fine.
I know it is. Thank you.
Yeah, 0-8's fine. Okay, Jimmy.
Number, yeah.
The Guardians are what?
6-2. They
Not
are
bad.
in second place in the American League Central to the Detroit Tigers.
What about the Brew Crew?
The Brew Crew are rolling at 4-1.
They started out 4-0 though, right?
Sure.
1 game skid. Why they only played 5 games?
I can't figure that out. I would assume there's been a lot of delays and postponements early on in the season, so maybe they were victims of that. I don't know.
What are the Dodgers out to?
They were not, by the way.
They were not. Do you know why it's only been 5 games then?
They've played 6.
Are they playing one right now?
They played 5. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Okay.
They had a rain out with the Mets, but they made it up.
Okay.
And then they had a day off, played the Twins for 2 games. Then they had a day off to travel yesterday. Now they take on the Seattle Mariners for 3.
They and the Braves appear to be the only teams that have only played 5 games in Major League Baseball, just for what it's worth. Their Dodgers are 7-2, by the way, Jake.
Also tonight, by the way, from 8 until 10 p.m., I'll be with Kevin Bohm at the District Tap North. So that's the District Tap up near Clearwater for our Jack Daniels small ball competition. We would love, love, love to see you there, because not only are we going to have samples you can try from Jack Daniels. Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient if that's your choice. We will have food there for you. So food will be served, and here's what we're going to do. For the last 2 weekends, Kevin and I have been in different places for the small ball, that's Papa Shot to me and you, competition from Jack Daniels, our friends at Jack Daniels. And we have the winner from 2 weeks ago and the winner from when I did it last week. They are automatically in the Final Four. But for the first hour tonight from 8 until 9 o'clock, your chance to go in and get a score that elevates you as to one of the 2 finalists. Then the Final Four, during the course of the final hour, those 4 contestants will compete for $1,000. So if you want To get a little Jack Daniels sample, you want to get free food, and you want to get $1,000 tonight from 8 until 10 o'clock. District Tap North is where you can find us. Brad Miller, by the way, we're going to try to wake him up. The former Purdue center, the former Indiana All-Star, well, NBA All-Star of the Indiana Pacers. Talking about Purdue in the Final Four is next.
The Ride with JMV.
On a Friday here, Query and Company on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan, and we talked, I guess it was last week before the Sweet 16 rounds, to former Purdue Boilermaker Brad Miller, former Sacramento King, former Indiana Pacer, for that matter, All-Star Brad Miller, and said, listen, if they go to the Final Four, we're bringing you back on. And Brad said, sounds good to me. And Brad, you're the good luck charm, because here we are. Final Four is here. Purdue is in it, and we're once again talking Boiler basketball. How are you?
Glad to be talking about Boiler basketball still this time of year.
Let's get to it. Your thoughts, I guess, on, maybe it's dangerous, North Carolina State, because I know you said you follow Purdue pretty avidly and you watch each and every game, but going back to your playing days, as fans, we look at a team like Carolina State and say, well, on paper, I mean, come on, like this is a team that barely got in the tournament and they got hot, but it can't last forever. Is there a danger from a player standpoint in getting kind of caught up in that sort of hype?
Oh, easily to get it into, but the thing about Purdue is, on paper, one should have never lost to 16 last year. So, they really understand that rankings don't matter and numbers don't matter. You got to, play the game and give it all you have every game, no matter what.
Brad, where did you see the biggest change in this team year over year? And at what point this season, if at all, did it feel like this is a different Purdue team?
It's just everything felt a little different. Just something felt special about this year. Obviously with the heartbreak of the way it ended last year, that is a crappy way to go, but it's also one of the best motivations, a coach could ever have to tell his players, about staying focused, sticking with it and everything, and just the mental part of it, the way they just beat the piss out of people this year. They just really wore people down every game all year long. So, they stick doing that. Feel good about it.
Brad, I think you did what probably most Purdue fans did to relax after the in-between rounds, if you will, from the Sweet 16 round and heading into the Final Four, and you went turkey hunting. And so when you were out and just leading up to going to Phoenix and being there with Purdue, was there like an extra spring in your step? I mean, as an alum, as a product of Purdue basketball, what did it mean for you to realize, wow, this is the week the Boilers are in the Final Four?
I mean, I'm sure everyone kind of saw Robbie Hummel lose, and I texted him after game like, man, I lost it at home too. You know, it's like, this just means a lot. I mean, really, honestly, like 1980 last time, that's well before, I mean, I was barely born, so I don't even, that doesn't count basically. So, I started thinking we're kind of like the Cubs fans, but as the college basketball, like, man, just tough luck, always something, have a good team, get hype. You just can't follow through and get the championship. And, obviously the Cubs finally were like, just give us one in 2016, and just the excitement of all the Cubs fans is very similar. I mean, as soon as they got the Final Four, my phone's like 20 texts, like ding, 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 ding. And it's like, are you going? Congrats. Brother. Yes. Oh, teammates, friends. Like, it just went completely nuts instantly. And, there's going to be so much Purdue support and love down in Phoenix this weekend. It's going to be great to see a lot of people. And, obviously, to see Purdue in the Final Four, there's not many of us around that have been able to say that. So, I'm glad, super glad for the program, Coach Painter, get that monkey off their back. And we're already there. Might as well, win two more since we're making that trip out west.
Now, with that, Brad, you said you got emotional. What was the moment that it really hit you? And was there a particular moment when you were watching on television where that lump in the throat was definitely there and you realized that it was okay to be emotional about it?
About a minute and a half left, but, when that final buzzer is like, okay, this is really happy, it's like, didn't want to text nobody before. I mean, minute and a half, I started letting myself kind of let go, like not be so wound up as a fan watching. I'm like, man, we got this. And then it was like, all right, they're going to cover the spread too. Man, this is just a win-win. Win-win for everybody here.
What about when Gene Katie got his part of the net? What did that mean to you as a former Gene Katie player?
Man, I wish I could have got him to the Final Four, I mean, as much as he's done for that program, obviously I'm glad and that he's been around a lot and able to go to all these games. And, it's a pretty family. I mean, Painter took over. He got coached under Coach Katie and then took over for him. It's kind of, for the last 40-some years, it's pretty much been a Purdue family with two coaches that, support and welcome all the old players and all the new players that are, to be coming through Purdue still.
Brad, have you had the opportunity yet to talk to Coach Katie in any capacity since they clinched their ticket to Phoenix?
No, I'll see him down there this weekend for sure, and definitely, congratulate him for getting Painter to be the coach and finally getting there. So,
does this feel like, as a former Boilermaker, that a lot of both your teammates as well as past players are able to really embrace and live vicariously through this group?
Oh, we are. There's no doubt about that. I mean, none of us got to the Final Four. I mean, Robbie. Robbie, that group, obviously 2019 with Thurston Edwards and Ryan Klein, those guys should have won that game against Virginia. It's just always had, close. Coach Katie they lost to freaking Wisconsin in the Elite Eight like a couple of years after I left to go to the Final Four. I'm like, come on, Brian Cardinal, how'd you guys lose to them? Like, it was the Final Four in Indianapolis that year too. So, I mean, they've been close with Coach Katie. Painter's been close, and it's just kind of this, monkey on the back that people always say, well, Purdue's been to the Final Four, right? That doesn't mean we haven't had a great program. We haven't had great teams during that time, but it's that little stigma. So this just relieves a lot of pressure for, I'm sure, the current players, the staff, the former players, all those IU basketball fans that I got to be friends with. It's talking about, look at the banners. Like, well, that was 70s. Like, that's really been a long time ago. So, this kind of gives us that step up again of, all right, yeah, we've done Final Four. Now we're hopefully try to go win it now.
Brad, there have been great performances in Purdue basketball history. Brad Miller is our guest here on Query & Company. There have been great Purdue performances in the tournament. I mean, Carson Edwards, who you mentioned, against Villanova. Ryan Klein, his game against Tennessee. Glenn Robinson had many of them. So did all of you guys have. Was Zach Edey's performance to get Purdue into the Final Four in his game against Tennessee, is that the single best tournament performance that you have seen from a Purdue player?
Yeah, I mean, that Carson Edwards, when he went off for 42, was awfully impressive, but just the way he dominated. I mean, it makes me go to Edey. Obviously, I think a big dog against Kansas, and then the Carson Edwards game is my top three performances in Purdue that I remember watching. Those are the three that stick out as my top three. And, man, he was just so dominant. It was just a big fella just putting in work down there. I mean, he said what he said after the game, and I was like, his attitude is really makes it impressive to see his leadership, all the burden that he's been taking on, that still fighting it and accepting it, and walking him straight in his face like, here's a challenge, bring it to me, I'll figure it out. And, he's really, really, really done an amazing job getting everybody to play together, play through him, and carry this team, really.
Speaking of Zach Edey, what do you make of that matchup on Saturday night of DJ Burns and Edey? Clearly, Edey has the height advantage there, but this will be one of the few times in this run where somebody that might be able to match up size-wise is going to be with him in the post. What do you make of that dynamic matchup between those two bigs?
Oh, it's going to be fun to watch these big fellas go at it. I mean, like I said, he's not going to – I don't know. He might still be able to back him down. I mean, Edey's not just big. He's strong, too. So, but it's going to be a battle. I mean, you're going to do the same thing, get it down low, feel the pace, try to get him in foul trouble. One of his best skills is literally getting the other team in foul trouble, because that hinders their whole game plan they had. Utah State had the two bigs. We had a big pick and roll that got two buckets, and he's like, all right, time to get them in foul trouble. Got the big guy in foul trouble. He sat down the rest of the half, and the game was over. So, I mean, it's going to be a chess match of what he can do, staying out of foul trouble, which he's phenomenal at somehow. I don't get it, but he's phenomenal at really not getting in foul trouble, but drawing fouls. So, let's see how it goes. But it's going to be a battle. Like I said, NC State's been hot. They're all the heater of all heaters, really. I mean, from not in the tournament to win the ACC. Coach got an extension because they won. Like, just kind of all types of crazy for them. But, we got a better story, more consistent, better team, really. But we got to go out there and prove it again.
Brad, I know that you have told us that, Brad Miller, that you follow the Sacramento Kings really as closely as you follow your beloved Purdue Boilermakers, right? A couple of teams that you played for. What are your thoughts on Sabonis and the way that he's played for Sacramento, and also what was your emotion when Tyrese Halliburton was the guy that they sent to Indiana to get Sabonis?
Man, I think Tyrese, I was not thrilled about that, just because I really, the NBA knows now what his potential is, and I still thought him and Fox, if we would have got Mike Brown before he made that trade, then maybe we're looking at Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, different version, because Tyrese is the ball handler and Fox is more of a, 1A, 2B kind of player in terms of he's not really a point guard, he's not a two guard, he's kind of in between. But Sabonis fills that role, obviously, what Tyrese would have done, the way offense totally runs to him, so it makes it fun for me to see the big guy being in charge, like kind of how it was back in the day with the Kings, how had Vlade, Weber, and myself that were really distribution big guys, and the guards got to run around and do their cut and just shoot it, and we did all that, literally everything else. At this point, the guy's just so strong. It's like I watch him play. He gets beat on every play, but he's also beating up on everybody every play. So it's like, he's just a freaking consistent wrecking ball out there. He's been absolutely amazing for the Kings as just everything changed everything out here for Sacramento, and was a huge reason why the Kings are doing so well now, for sure.
So you've got a bunch of land, as I understand it, in northern Indiana. Of course, you're from, Kendallville, right outside of Fort Wayne. but you still live, if I'm not mistaken, outside of Sacramento. What is it about out there that you most enjoy and that keeps you out there, and how much time do you get back to Indiana?
Oh, the weather. I mean, you talk about Cali, the weather. It's 75 out today. A little windy, maybe 5 mile an hour gust or so. But, it's just my daughter was born out here, and, kind of came to compromise and want to raise her out here and enjoy the weather. I can see the snow, but it's never going to snow here in Sacramento. So that's just kind of nice to have the little mix. I mean, Northern Cal is beautiful. The rest of California, I don't care for, especially go farther south to that LA area. But, the Sacramento is, obviously I was out country, in the country, rice fields, and yesterday aiming farmer shooting turkeys with air guns. There's a lot of more country out here up on this part. I mean, California wants this, the people up here would like to call it the state of Jefferson, be like, we'll do our own laws and everything. And so it's a different world from the rest of California. It's just a pay-to-play state is all it is. But I'm actually going to be moving back to Indiana this summer and calling it good.
So no more warm winters for you then, right?
No, I'm going to find a place in Florida.
So why leave in California though?
I'll be booking it down south to Florida to sit on the boat.
Yeah, that's probably smart, man. I can appreciate that. All right, lastly, in terms of just soaking this in and this Purdue reunion that's going to take place for the Final Four, I know that you had a Pacer reunion during All-Star Weekend. Give me the players from Purdue that you're most looking forward to hanging out with, seeing and catching up with in Phoenix?
Well, my old teammate Chad Austin. Sorry, he actually hit me up. I saw him in All-Star game for the first time, and I don't know, it's been quite a few years, so it was good to link up there. And then we're like, well, if Purdue makes it to Phoenix, you come? He's like, oh yeah, I'll come. I'm like, well, I'll definitely be there. So, I get to see him as an old teammate that, I went to prep school with him, then 4 years of college. So we go 5 years of our life together. But it's going to be a lot of random, different Purdue guys. Robbie's going to be out there trying to get a hold of Raphael Davis. These guys are the fancy reporters and everything, doing all the TV announcements. So, there's going to be a whole variety. I mean, I'm sure, you can go down the list. Ryan Klein will be there, new guys. I mean, we already got my old team, Brandon Brantley. I mean, Conzo Martin's probably going to be there. Matt Waddell is going to be there. Obviously, he's got a son. There's just kind of the list goes on and on of, there's going to be a lot of support. I know that everyone I've talked to, teammates, whether it's Instagram, text, is just the excitement is for real. And the proudness of our program is, finally we get a peacock a little bit this year to, some of those other blue blood schools, like my friend that played, Kentucky guy. He's just like, man, I'm so happy for you guys. Congratulations. He gets it. And it's so, it's just going to be a very emotional for a lot of Purdue alumni, I'm sure.
Now, you can't mention peacocks after the St. Mary's loss a couple years ago, right? People are still
but we're going to peacock now.
Still, hey, by the way, somebody told me this, so we'll end with this, fact or fiction, okay? Somebody told me that when you played at Purdue and the Purdue basketball team would do conditioning, cross-country running, that you would instead go to the driving range and just sit and try to tee off and hit them with golf balls as they ran past. True or false?
That's false.
All right. So you don't swing a golf club?
No, I do that, but I wasn't hitting. I was probably out running everybody, honestly.
All right. Fair enough. Well, I'm sure you're going to have fun hanging out with all of the guys this weekend, and best of luck to Purdue, and soak it in because obviously it's been a great program. You're a part of that, Brad, and look forward to having you back in Indiana when you become a Hoosier again.
All right. Sounds good.
Brad Miller, who, by the way, I think I mentioned this last time we had him on, and appreciate it, Brad. He kind of sounds like it too, but he looks like the Brawny Man now. Like when he came back for that, the Pacers had a reunion for All-Star Weekend, and he was back for that. And, I mean, just, he looks like an outdoorsman, I mean, honestly. And I would think living in Northern California would be a great place to live, but as you said, pay to play, and moving back to Indiana, he's got a ton of land in Northern Indiana.
Yeah, but he also stressed one key thing, which is where I'm most envious. He's going to get a place in Florida, too. Got to have somewhere to go when it gets cold here. I respect that.
The Powerball rolled over. You know that, right?
I did see that, yeah.
Are you one of those that doesn't buy a Powerball ticket?
Like I don't, but it's not some weird like, oh, I don't need to. I just
So I want. Let me make sure I'm right on this. So you
Oh my
you
goodness.
sit around and you use your gambling app like Whack-A-Mole, and you wager on like Portuguese soccer matches,
okay.
but you won't spend $2 for a Powerball ticket.
Okay, so there's two things there. First off, it was Portuguese ping pong. Secondly,
Okay, sorry.
secondly, I said the same thing about table games, and I realized this is just going to get a okay.
Like
all
table tennis?
All right. No, like blackjack.
Okay.
I've said the same things about table games. They entertain me. They're fun. I'm forgetful about the Powerball, but let's focus on table games. Had this issue in Vegas. I lost $80 in like an hour at a blackjack table. And I made the decision like, hey, I want to try to make it out of the Vegas trip either a couple, like maybe $100 down or even, or maybe a couple $100 up. And so I went to what makes me feel like I have a better chance of making money back, which is the ignorance of, oh, I know sports. I can make a little bit of money here. And I did successfully on the Vegas trip. But additionally, the other avenue to it, at least in terms of table games versus sports betting, you can sit on that for 2 hours, whereas if you're at a table, like it's more liquid to be impulse to spend more money. As for the lottery, Powerball, Mega Millions, whatever, I'm just forgetful. I forget to take the trip to go to, 7-Eleven or a.
That's fair.
It's not like, I don't. Who waste their time with that? That's
there
not
are
my
also
take.
a lot of times where I'm like, wait a minute, like what day is it? Is it too late now or whatever else? I thought about this. Can you imagine? Okay. Can you imagine if you won the Powerball? So like right now the Powerball is at $1.23 billion. Okay?
Yep.
Now I'm going to have to look this up and crunch the numbers because I find this fascinating. The $1.23 billion, and my understanding is you can bequeath the winnings, if I'm not mistaken. But I think just about anybody takes the lump sum because investment of it is probably you are smarter to do it that way.
I don't
right?
think you can bequeath if you're taking the monthly payment or the yearly payment. I feel like that stops once the winner of the ticket passes.
I don't disagree. I've always heard that, but I believe I looked it up and that's not accurate.
Okay.
I could be wrong. But either way, so right now, okay, the Powerball right now it's up to $1.3 billion. That is a cash value of $608.9. So that means that if you were to win it, you could say, I just want the $608.9 million right now and be done with it, right? Now, then that is before tax, I believe, right? So you have a federal tax of 37%. So if it's 600, we'll say 608. So 37% of that, okay? So after the tax, you're going to take home, it's still going to be a pretty substantial number here. Help me out here. 37% of 608 would be what?
To do it on my phone.
I mean, I can tell you it's going to be roughly 40%, so it's going to be like 240. So you're looking at basically, you're still walking with like $370 million, right?
Sure.
So $370 million clear of tax. You got a state tax as well to pay. Let's say you throw in. So you're walking away with, I'm just going to say for the sake of argument, $332 million. Yours. Right?
Sure.
I mean, can you imagine if you won the Powerball, but you didn't realize actually that the ticket you had purchased, the one that you'd won with, you had bought like on Thursday morning, and it actually was worth, $2 million. You thought you had the 300. Would you be devastated for the rest of your life would you live the rest of your life thinking if only I'd have bought it a day earlier or won a day earlier, even though it's a different ticket? You get what I'm saying though?
Yes.
Could you possibly be disappointed by that?
Wouldn't that imply though that you're playing the same numbers every time? Like
What's
to
that?
live with that, to have your mind go to a
Well, if
place,
it's
wouldn't
quick
you be?
pick. I think most people probably do a quick pick,
Sure.
right?
But isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that randomly generated?
You would walk with like $360 million. No, the quick pick's randomly generated.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
no, I'm simply saying what I'm getting at. Let's say that you buy the Powerball every single day.
Sure.
Okay, and you forgot to check your tickets. So on Friday, you're checking your tickets and you're looking at them, and you have a ticket that's the winner, and you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then you realize, oh, wait a minute. The one that I have is from the like Saturday drawing or whatever, and not the one that was 1.3. So instead I won $5 million. Could you actually be disappointed by $5 million?
I think there'd be some level of initial disappointment because you would have gotten your hopes up about, oh my goodness. And then eventually when you came back down, you're like, all right, $5 million's not bad.
I mean, $5 million though after the taxes is like definitely major assistance the rest of your life money, but it's not like I'm buying a place in 10 different places around the world money.
Right.
Because I got news for you. If I won the one for $3, whatever it is, 80, after I signed off on the show and you guys are like, and you're like, well, so you're going to do the show tomorrow? I'm like, I don't know. Like, how hard is it to satellite from Barcelona? You know what I mean? Billy Keller has a lot of experience when it comes to Purdue in the Final Four because he played in one, he coached in one, and he's going to talk about one. He's going to do it next.
Get ready, Greenwood. It's JMV and the newest.
perfectly fitting to play this song as an intro for our next guest, Eddie Garrison. Do you know why it's perfectly fitting?
Because he's going to the Paradise City, which is Phoenix, this weekend.
That's
I think he is, at least.
within the target of a decent thing, right? But that song, of course, is performed by Axl Rose, and Axl Rose was born in 1962 and lived in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is exactly where, just a few years after that, our next guest arrived in 1966, as a matter of fact. Arrived to play for the Purdue Boilermakers, helping them, along with who we talked to yesterday and Rick Mount, to the 1969 Final Four. We're talking about Billy Keller, whose roots run through Purdue basketball in multiple ways regarding Final Fours. Coaching standpoint as well, but he joins us now. Billy, how are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the show with you.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on, and I want to begin with simply this. Just your thoughts, I guess, your excitement level, your thoughts on this very fun run that we can say is a run for Purdue right now to the Final Four, but let's be real, even with some of the disappointments, has been like a 2 to 3 year run, kind of the culmination of that under Matt Painter.
Well, you can tell that these guys have a chip on their shoulder because of what's happened to them the last 3 years. So I think they're excited. I know I'm excited. I don't think I've missed one of their games on TV at all. Of course, I'm down here in St. Pete, Florida. I was able to go see them play in person against Minnesota when I was home at Christmas time. But this team is really, really exciting to watch. And, of course, with Edie and Smith and those guys, it's really been a pleasure to watch them.
Billy, we've been asking a lot of former Purdue players this question, and obviously you felt the elation of being a part of a Final Four and going to a national championship game. So I know it's a little different from your perspective, but for the Purdue old guard, what does it mean to see this team make this run? And ultimately, what would it mean to see them hoist the thing on Monday night?
Well, like I said, it would be so exciting, and I think it's a dream come true, really, for Purdue Nation. We have been expecting big things over the last few years and didn't get it, and I think that's why these guys now have a chip on their shoulder, and they are determined to get this done. Now, whether it happens or not, you never know because you have to play the games. But I'm so excited to watch them play because they are playing. Really, I think Purdue plays a different type of game than what Rick and I had the opportunity to play. Our offense was geared more towards Rick, and the team now, that's the present team, is now gearing their game towards Edie. And so it's a inside-outside situation, but I think they've got a great shot at winning this thing, and I think Purdue Nation has been waiting for a long time, keeping their fingers crossed, and I think that's why it's so exciting because of the fact that we had the opportunity and it slipped away. So we'll see what happens.
Billy, to me, and I want your perspective because, you've played, you've coached, you've been around the game in multiple levels in about every area that you can, from high school to the professional ranks. So you can probably read basketball body language, right? And for me, when the horn sounded against Tennessee, I read the basketball body language of Matt Painter and Zach Edey. And what I saw was this, Billy Keller. I saw two guys that went, whew, now back to work. That's how it looked to me, like they were well aware that there's still work to be done. What was your interpretation?
Well, I believe that was the same thing, and I do believe that the very first game of the tournament, I think I saw that sigh of relief at that time as well. It's no surprise that those guys would feel that way because the fact that Tennessee played them so well in the first meeting, because I think Purdue won that game by 7 maybe. So Purdue knew that they were in for a game and a battle, and only beating a team by 6 or 7 the first time, you knew that you were going to be in a game. And so there had to be a sigh of relief when that horn blew, and you could tell, I believe, that Fletcher was the guy that when the game was over, he threw the ball pretty high in the air with excitement. And I know that those guys were excited about not only beating Tennessee, but also having the opportunity to go to the Final Four.
Purdue great Billy Keller is our guest, as well as Pacers legend Billy Keller is our guest. And I want to shift towards those waters for a bit, Billy. You win 3 ABA championships in 70, 72, and 73. You obviously played with Rick Mount during that time, but also played alongside George McGinnis. What can you tell me about your relationship with George and just those ABA fun-filled Pacers teams?
Well, George and I became friends really during the summertime because I was 4 years ahead of him at Washington High School, so we never had the opportunity to play. But I was working for a Baker Forms construction company. My summertime job that Purdue had gotten for me, and George worked for as a labor. His dad was a labor foreman, and George was working for his dad and that company. And so we had a chance to get together a couple of summers, actually 3 summers that I was working. So I got to know George pretty well at that point. And what a great guy George was. I mean, he never met a stranger. He was always gracious and friendly to people. He always spent time with people that may want an autograph. And it was just a wonderful person. Not only was he a great basketball player, but he was a good person. And he really became an important part of the Indianapolis area after his playing days. So I'll tell you, I was so disappointed to hear that George had passed. And I had tried to keep up through Jeannie Brown. You know, any time something had happened, Jeannie Brown would call me, and anytime I saw Jeannie Brown come across my phone, I thought, oh no, somebody has passed. And so I kept pretty close tabs on George, so I knew that phone call was probably going to be George. But so disappointing that he basically died by himself. You know, I don't know. I think they had to bring him back 2 or 3 different times, but you know, what a wonderful guy. And he's the same kind of guy on the basketball court. Friendly, except to the opponents, and I would rather be on Georgia's side in a ball game than against him, because he was a real baller. But again, a great guy, great player, and he just loved to play.
And Jeannie Brown, the wife of Roger Brown, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I wanted to clarify that for folks who. You know, and I know it's still a very close-knit group, right? Those that were part of the ABA with the Pacers. And, of course, one of the guys that played in the ABA with the Pacers had played with you at Purdue. So let's go back to 1969 in the Final Four with Rick Mount, who we talked to yesterday. Billy, what are your recollections when you look back on that run that you guys made?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've really had a good team. And I do believe that had we not been banged up, I believe that we would have been more competitive. Whether we would have won or not, I don't know. But we didn't play our best game. And when I say that we were banged up, Herman Gilliam was just coming back from an injury, and he was one of our major players. Chuck Bavis did not play, who was our 7-footer, you know, and Rick didn't have his best game in the first half of that. And so we were down by 12 going into the halftime, but they ended up beating us by 20. But being banged up is not an excuse. We were playing against the best basketball team that had ever been assembled at that time, with Johnny Wooden being the coach and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being their focal point. And UCLA, we had played them 3 times that year. We played them in the dedication game at Mackey Arena. They beat us on last-second shot by 2 points. They also then beat us by 12 at the Poly Pavilion out in California my senior year in the beginning, and then they beat us by 20 in the finals. So whenever a team beats you 3 times, they're probably a better team. But I'll tell you that the guy that we missed the most in that game against UCLA in the finals was Chuck Bavis. Chuck Bavis was 7 feet, probably 230, 235, he really could body up Kareem, keep him away from the boards, and he did really a nice job on him the first 2 times that we played. But since we didn't have him, we substituted with Jerry Johnson and Frank Kaufman. Those guys, if you mold them into one, they still wouldn't have been 235 pounds and
right.
7 feet tall, but they did the best that they could. But Kareem basically just kind of controlled that game. And like I say, we were banged up, and but again, they were really, really good with Kareem. And I remember we like to fast break. They like to press in that first game, in the dedication game. Kareem was shooting a free throw, and my job was to line up right behind on the circle, right behind the free throw shooter. Well, I'm just trying to give you some idea of how dominant Kareem was at that time. But when the shot went up, I could not see the basket standing right behind him. I mean, he just seemed to be such a giant in the game. So having the opportunity to get beat on a last-second shot against a Kareem team and then lose by 12 and then be injured for the most part, with a lot of our guys end up playing against the best, creates a lot of positive memories for me.
Yeah. Bavis had gotten hurt in the regionals, right? Didn't Bavis have like a chest or abdominal issue that took place during the regional?
Yeah, I think it was a shoulder.
Okay.
But that I could be wrong on that. But I know we didn't have him, and I know that we really missed him because we didn't have anybody that could replace him in the middle to guard against Kareem.
Billy Keller is our guest, talking about Purdue in the Final Four. Of course, the Boilers in 1969, then again in 1980 in the Final Four, the 80 Final Four, Market Square Arena, Iowa, UCLA, Louisville, and Purdue. And the Boilers led by Lee Rose and his trusty assistant, who was Billy Keller. Billy, that run, and I was a kid, but let me tell you the things that I've heard and read about Purdue's 1980 Final Four run, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to dispel it or verify it, okay? But what I'd always heard is that clearly Joe Barry Carroll was an unbelievable talent. He was the number 1 pick in the draft, and his play was a big part for Purdue's Final Four run. But Lee Rose leaving after the end of the year and maybe some of the chatter of that, along with just players kind of all not being on the same page, it was a great run, but it was one that didn't have total cohesiveness throughout the season for its roster. Is that an accurate statement?
I believe so. I believe there was a lot of turmoil, starting out with George King and Lee Rose. They never really saw eye to eye. You might even say that there was not a lot of love there between the two, which I think created some turmoil. Then also you had some players that were not happy because they weren't getting playing time and because the focus was on Joe Barry. And Joe Barry was kind of the guy that he was a guy that needed to know. He needed to know what was going on, and Lee really, catered to him because he was the best player. He was going to get us into the finals. He was going to get us where we were going to end up going. And I think guys kind of resented that a little bit. You had different personalities on that team. And to be honest with you, the team itself, and I give credit to Lee because he was able to kind of coach those guys that were not all on the same page. And to do as well as we did, I think to some extent was kind of a surprise to me, because usually if you're going to win and you're going to win big, you got to have guys that are on the same page. You got to have guys that bond together, that really like each other. And I'm not sure that we really had that. So getting as far as we did with the challenges that we had, it ended up being really pretty good season.
Did you have it in 69 in terms of that camaraderie and chemistry? And if so, did it make it difficult from a coaching standpoint to kind of understand the players' perspectives when you didn't have it?
Well, yeah, I think it helped because in 69 we had a very close-knit group. everybody played their role. And I'll tell you, George King was a master at getting guys to understand their roles and to
and by the way, Billy, for those unfamiliar, George King was your coach in 69. He was the athletic director by 80, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But I was talking about the 69 team when he was the head coach, and he was a master at getting guys to recognize what their abilities were, what their contributions needed to be, what role they were going to play, because obviously Rick was the shooter. And Rick was a great shooter. There's no question about it. But I think also Herman Gilliam came in from North Carolina, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he was an excellent player. And I think George was constantly maybe talking to Herman to try to keep Herman on the same page. As I mentioned earlier, our team in 69, we were focused more on Rick. And, Rick was the guy that was going to take us. But I do believe that there were a lot of guys on that team that could have done more in the way of contributions, but in order for us to be successful in George's eyes, he wanted everybody to kind of cater to the game plan, which was Rick to be the shooter. If I were going to score, Herman was going to score, we were going to do that off of the offense that might be the secondary or on fast breaks or free throws. So I think there was a little bit of friction there, but like I say, George was a master at getting guys to understand their role and to play their role. It's just so unfortunate that we were banged up at the end, because I feel like we would have been so much more competitive than what we were.
This particular group, Billy, kind of feels like a hybrid of those two teams, because you've got a dominant big man like you had in 80, but you have the chemistry and everybody understanding their role of this group. That's the thing I think that Matt Painter has masterfully done, is one through, the equipment manager. Everybody knows their role. What is Purdue going to have to do to get these final 2 wins and bring back a title?
Well, I think what they have to do is they have to continue to focus on what they're doing, and they can't focus. Their focus cannot be in the second game. It can't be focusing on UConn, assuming that they're going to win. They got to really focus on the task at hand, and that's North Carolina State. If you overlook somebody, that always is a problem for teams. I think when we beat North Carolina in the semifinal round, I think in 69, I think they overlooked us because I think they were overlooking us, thinking they were going to get into the final game against UCLA. And I do believe that that's one of the reasons why we had so much success against them. So with this team, and I love Matt Painter's demeanor with the players. He's always calm, seems like to me. He's always calm and collected. He's always coaching players when they come off the floor. I think these players are not only playing for themselves, but they're playing for Matt Painter, and I think they're also playing for the Purdue fans. And I think that's what they've got to do. They just got to continue to do what they've been doing. And I heard in an interview from Lance Jones, and he was saying, this team doesn't get too high and they don't get too low. They kind of celebrate the moment. So when they beat Tennessee, they were celebrating in the moment. But he said we had the day off right after that particular game when they got home, and then the next day they were back in the gym working. And I think this is an emotional team that's also a business team, and that's what he was saying. They don't get too high, they don't get too low. They're just going to go out and play. One thing I was thinking about too, Jake, is that we didn't have all the media and all of the things going on around the tournament. These guys are constantly having someone put a microphone in front of them or asking them questions, and it could be a distraction. But I believe that when we played, George King took all of that off of our shoulders, and he took took the questions and got in front of the microphone and that kind of thing. But there wasn't nearly as much as there is today. But I think Matt Painter is a master at anything pertaining to his team. He's gonna let some of the players talk, but for the most part, he's going to keep everybody level-headed and ready to play. And that's the thing that I like about him so much, is that he is a former player, and he can really communicate with his players of what needs to be done. And you can surely bet right now that he's got his team focused on the job at hand of playing against North Carolina State and not focusing on a game beyond that.
Well, Billy, when you do talk radio for a living, and this is literally the only thing I know how to do, but one of the things you try not to do is, like, you want to have a reverence for your guests, right? But you don't want to, like, completely, like, kiss them up and show some sort of non-objectivity. However, you mentioned the media coverage that players have today and how ubiquitous it is. For me, the ubiquitous thing for growing up in Indianapolis was it was difficult as a fan or a player of basketball to not in some way, shape, or form come across a way in which Billy Keller was helping young basketball players, whether it be basketball camp down at UIndy, whether it be shooting clinics coming into a high school, whether it be speaking to schools, speaking to teams. Anywhere that I went, I represent an entire generation of players who benefited from the time and generosity of Billy Keller, the basketball wisdom of Billy Keller, and, of course, being able to enjoy the contributions from the winning standpoint at Washington High School, Purdue, the Pacers, etc., in this area. So I want to speak for a ton of guys and gals in my age group and simply saying not only thanks for your time today, but thanks for your nonstop efforts in bettering the game for those of us that are younger than you in the state of Indiana.
Well, I sure appreciate that. I love remembering as much as I can about the past, and I'm excited about the future for these Boilermakers and also for the fans that are out there. It's just fun to be a part, and it seems like, and I was telling my wife earlier today, I said, when it comes NC2A Final Four or NC2A tournament, it seems like I'm always having the honor of being on the radio shows and TV shows and that kind of thing. So hopefully we're doing something right and have done something right in the past that can help the future.
Well, we appreciate it so much, Billy, and enjoy the games. Enjoy Arizona if you're heading out, and, of course, Boiler up, right?
Absolutely. Boiler up, and thanks so much for having me on.
Appreciate it. Billy Keller, the basketball legend of Indiana, Indianapolis, Washington High School, Purdue, and, of course, the Pacers, along with a coaching career that touched many places throughout, including University of Indianapolis here in central Indiana. Take a quick break. 2 o'clock hour, Mark Monte joining us. Rob Blackman as well. We roll on here on a Friday. Aquarium Company, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
If you're unaware, T-Mobile calls themselves
They told me I have to do this fast like I'm an auctioneer. You know, I don't know if you know this or not, but I was a 1991 North Central High School tongue-twisting champion, right? She sells seashells by the seashore, for example. Like, for example, if I simply had to say, we actually went a little bit long, and Eddie's been jumping up and down with his hands in the air, so Mark Monte is next.
You love spring and Indy, but you hate the paint.
O'clock hour is underway. By the way, Eddie Garrison, for Purdue fans that would like to hear our interviews with Brad Miller, Billy Keller, Mitch Daniels, Rick Mount, who we had yesterday, among others, they would be able to find those where?
So you go to 1075thefan.com. Right at the top of the screen, if you are on your phone, your desktop, your laptop, whatever the case is, there's a banner that says the Podcast Center. You can click there. It will take you to all of our podcasts for all of our shows. But if you're wanting Purdue specific, right there on the homepage, you'll see Purdue basketball interviews on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan during NCAA tournament run. And it will have all the interviews each show has done. So you'll see ours, the ones that we've done. You'll see Brian Evans, PJ Thompson, Chris Kramer, Matt Painter, Robbie Hummel. Like, there's a lot on there. So if you are in aspirations of your Purdue content, there you go.
Did you say Brian Evans?
Yeah, it was on there.
Okay, in the Purdue content?
Yeah, they were talking about Purdue on JMV.
I mean, I get that Brian would certainly know Purdue, no question about that. Joining us now, another guy that knows a little about Purdue. He's written books about him. He also has a new book coming out, which I'm excited for. And truthfully, he has been a huge help in lining up some of the guests that you have heard from that Eddie just mentioned, where you can hear on podcasts, talking about our friend Mark Monte, who joins the program. He writes for the Indianapolis Business Journal, among his website, markmonteith.com. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, Jake. Good to be with you.
Let's begin with this. You followed around one of the iconic Purdue groups under Gene Cady, the triplets that won, of course, Big Ten titles in 86, 87, and then 88. Outright in 88, if I'm not mistaken. They were upset by Michigan or by Kansas State and Mitch Richmond. What do you think for Gene Cady? You know him as well as anybody, and just the Matt Painter handoff, if you will. What does all of this mean? Not just for maybe Gene Cady, for the legacy of it, and just kind of the sigh of relief for Purdue basketball.
Yeah, I think it means a lot. I think it means a lot to Gene Cady. Certainly, he is a low ego guy who can take a lot of pleasure and pride in somebody else's accomplishment. So I don't think there's a part of him that's feeling like, well, I could have done this, or, I was as good a coach as Matt, or anything like that. I think he's taken a lot of pleasure and pride in this. Of course, he recruited Matt Painter to come play for him. Most people know that Matt, grew up an IU fan and wanted to play for Bob Knight, and supposedly there was a scholarship offer that was withdrawn to take Todd Leary instead. And, Matt Painter, who actually was a pretty big high school recruit. He could have gone to Michigan State or Minnesota, among other places, but he goes to Purdue and didn't have a great playing career there. I think he was basically a one-year starter. Matt always makes fun of his playing career, puts himself down a lot. He once told me, I was brought here to give Tony Jones confidence, meaning, Tony Jones would dominate him so much in practice that had to make Tony feel good about his game. But anyway, Matt played for Coach Cady, and then he became he took the hand off, as you mentioned, and replaced him. And I think Gene Cady can rightfully feel a lot of pride because Matt certainly has modeled his coaching approach quite a bit after Gene Cady. He's a much different personality, but certainly does a lot of the same things that Coach Cady did. So I think this has to mean a lot to Gene Cady.
Mark, prior to Matt Painter finally breaking through to get to a Final Four, the most recent example I can think of a coach unfairly being labeled because of the crapshoot that is this tournament would be Jay Wright and him breaking through finally with Villanova, and they go on, of course, to win a national title. I always kind of thought the narrative around Matt Painter was just that, a narrative, and I know that his sights are not just set on that accomplishment last weekend. It is ultimately hoisting the trophy in Phoenix come Monday night, but what would it mean for Matt Painter and just his journey that you highlighted in your first answer as a whole for it to not culminate, because he's not going to be done by any means, but for it to have the latest gem in that trophy case of a national championship?
Oh, boy. It's the ultimate, right? There's nothing better you can do as a college coach than win that championship. And, we do place too much emphasis sometimes on these tournaments and these championships. We need to look at the entire career of these coaches to really judge them. But certainly for Matt Painter and all of Purdue, it would be a huge monkey off the back. It would, Matt is, I was with him for 2 seasons really on a day-by-day basis, and just hoping to be able to put a book project together that never really came through. The seasons just didn't warrant it. But he would say, outright that his goal is to win a national championship at Purdue. So that's every coach's goal, obviously, who's at a major college program. But still, that's something he's always wanted. He wants it not only for himself, but for Purdue and for Gene Cady and for other people, his former players. So it's just the ultimate. And Matt, like Coach Cady, is not an egomaniac by any stretch. In fact, those two coaches are two of the rare college coaches who might benefit from having a bigger ego than they have. But, Matt's not a guy who displays his Coach of the Year trophies in his house or anything like that. He's just not interested in that part of it. But it would obviously mean just a huge amount to him. And gosh, to Purdue fans who have had to listen to IU fans talk about 5 national championships all these years, for them to have one and have a recent one would also mean a huge amount.
I don't think that this part of Matt Painter's legacy was ever really a factor for those in the know of Purdue basketball at the time. But Mark, how crazy does this story become when you think 10 years ago they missed the NCAA tournament? The year before, they were in the CBI, I think quarterfinals it was, and there were serious, at least national murmurs of, would there be a change? And ultimately, Purdue does not do that, and clearly they made the right choice given all the success that followed. But how crazy does this story become knowing that a decade ago it was a CBI and a 12th place finish in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I don't know that there's ever been a coach that I could think of who, like Matt Painter, he won Big Ten championships, and he had a team that really could have contended for a national championship if Rob Hummel had not blown out his knee. Who was at that type of peak and then dropped down to, finishing last in the Big Ten. And like you said, there were doubters about his future. If you were reading Purdue message boards like at goldenblack.com back then, there were fans who wanted him out of there. Thought he had done what he could do and it's time to make a change. And now we're back, to where he's on top again. That's really, every coach will have up and down years, but to go from, winning the Big Ten to being at the very bottom of the Big Ten and back up again, I don't think I've ever seen that. And a couple, recruiting mistakes, couple injuries, whatever, it can happen. And give Matt Painter credit for doing what needed to be done to get it back on top. And I would add that he has done it the right way. As close as I was to the program, I could tell you that was as clean a college basketball program as there could be. I saw how carefully they adhered to the rules about when can you talk to a parent, that type of thing, what the non-contact period, all that. They paid attention to that stuff. He was very, very serious about adhering to the rules. Now it seems like it's hard to break rules with NIL, right? Everybody gets paid, so it's you really got to work at it to cheat now. But he ran a clean program. He was winning Big Ten titles. He obviously had the respect of his players. So it's great to see that he was able to get back on top.
Eddie, by chance, do you happen to have, and we'll bring Mark Monte in on this, the breaking news sounder? This news from Adrian Wojnarowski, which we know is typically all-knowing. Herb Simon has been elected into the Basketball Hall of Fame as a contributor to the game, and a formal announcement will be expected shortly. Mark, your reaction?
Great. Yeah. It's good to see because Herb to me has been a great owner, in that I know people complain about he's not spending more money, but I don't, I think that got overblown. But I think he has done it the right way by staying in the background. Talk about egos. He's another low ego guy who, he's not Jerry Jones out there front and center, running the team or trying to make decisions. He delegated to the general managers and let them do their job. He's a legitimate businessman who, along with his brother Mel, built a hugely successful business, and they bought the Pacers to save them for the city. Literally the Pacers would be in Sacramento if not for the Simon brothers stepping up in 1983, I guess it was, to buy the team. So, again, that's only a local story that people around the country don't necessarily care. But he has been a foundation of the NBA as an owner and certainly a contributor to the NBA as another guy who wanted things done the right way and went about his job the right way.
Mark, back to, and congratulations, by the way, to Herb Simon. I agree. Obviously, well-deserved. Hopefully, we can try to get him on the show here shortly.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. He's not a guy. He's a guy. And you know what? A lot of people don't realize, Mark, not only does he not do a lot of interviews, but he's still, holding board meetings and flying around. And you know what I mean? It's not like he's just sitting at home watching games, right?
Right. He's a businessman, a working businessman, ongoing business. And, yeah, I was able to get a one-on-one episode with Herb several years ago, and I think that was seriously because the Pacers were really going through a difficult time at the time, and he felt like he needed to step up and, speak out for the franchise. But, yeah, he doesn't do much to call attention to himself.
Give me an aspect of Matt Painter that you think is misunderstood.
Let's see. I think, he comes across so well in interviews, and people talk about his calm demeanor, and I heard your conversations with Billy Keller earlier talked about everybody loves Matt Painter's demeanor. He can get on guys, and certainly I think he's changed somewhat in that regard, but you go back 10, 15 years, he was a hard ass, man. He would kick guys out of practice. He would really get after them. He had that element to his coaching, I guess, similar to Coach Katie. Now, my impression is that he is not like that so much now. I don't know if that's fear out of guys transferring, because you don't have to sit out anymore. I think all coaches kind of tread a little more lightly now as far as trying to keep their players, from wanting to bolt. But he certainly, as nice a guy as he is, was capable of really going off and getting after guys and kicking guys out of practice. And post-game locker room after a loss could really be tough. I witnessed some of that back in the Hummel, Etuan, Moore, Jawan Johnson years. So people may not realize that, because certainly he presents a different side to the public. Gene Katie, after a loss, would be pounding a table and spitting nails and everything. You knew he was really mad. Painter would always, have things under control more by the time he got in front of the media. But he's got that, he's capable of that. He'll get after somebody if he felt like it was warranted.
Mark, something that I think Mark Monte is our guest. Again, you can read his columns at ibj.com, markmonteith.com, where he has also archived his historic interviews with a number of dignitaries and sports figures over time in the state of Indiana. And you also, part of me wants to say that you have a new book you've written. That's not entirely true. You have a book you completed, but you didn't necessarily write. You rescued and saved it. And people are going to be excited about it for the month of May in particular. Elaborate for me and illuminate for us what exactly you have done.
Yeah, the book is called Vukovich, The Man Who Wouldn't Lift, and it was written by an Indianapolis sports writer, Angelo Angelopoulos, back in the 1950s. Angelo, in my mind, is probably the greatest sports writer the city has ever had. Not that people were likely to care about such a thing, but, really talented guy whose work I became familiar with in researching other things years ago. But he was an Indianapolis news sports writer. And he and Vukovich were close. Vukovich, as you know, Jake, he should have won the race in 52. Steering wheel part failed him with 8 laps to go. He won it in 53 and 54, got killed in the race in 55 in a backstretch accident.
And while leading, by the way.
And while leading, exactly. The guy should have won 4 in a row, and imagine the legend he would be if he won 4 in a row. So Angelo, wrote a book after Vukovich died, and I clearly worked with Vukovich's wife on it, Esler. And there were articles in the newspaper about how this book was going to be published by Bob's Merrill, which was an Indianapolis publishing firm at the time, and it was supposed to be out in the spring of 1960, and it just never happened. And I don't know why it never got completed and published, but it just didn't. And this manuscript, typewritten with a lot of handwritten edits that some were not even legible, was in the closet of Angelo's nephew, Pete Curlis, for decades. Pete Curlis of Curlis Jewelry Store up on 86th Street. He had it in his closet. When I found out about that, I wanted to see it, and I got it done. My wife typed it in word for word into a laptop, and we completed it. Didn't have to rewrite it or anything, but certainly it needed some work. And the book is now out. It's on Amazon, and it should be in local stores and available through me or whoever sells books. So it was quite a project, but it was a lot of fun taking this book that should have come out a long time ago and getting it done. And obviously I wouldn't have gone to the trouble to do it if I didn't think it was worthy. Angelo was in the garage with Vukovich. He's at dinner with him. It's really an intimate account to Bill Vukovich's life and what the experience was like when he was winning those races. And Vukovich is certainly a compelling figure himself.
And so, Mark, and pardon my ignorance or my asking maybe to even repeat here, did his project of writing this book stall because of the fatality of Vukovich, or the part where you had to kind of pick up how much of Mark Monteith's writing is in the book?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a lengthy prologue to tell the story of Angelo Angelopoulos, who has his own tragic story. and I wrote a lengthy epilogue to bring the Vukovic story up to date. The book itself that Angelo wrote, and he is the author, is Vukovic, up through the 1955 race, and in fact, it basically ends with him getting killed in the race. So I updated it and told the story of the Vukovic family after that. But it's Vukovic. My part in it is the prologue and epilogue, and I particularly wanted to write about Angelo because this guy was a Navy pilot in World War II. He's a 1936 Manual High School grad, a 1940 Butler grad. He gets a job with the news, but that's quickly interrupted by World War II. He's the Navy pilot, and he was assigned to fly over the bombing sites in Japan after the big ones were dropped. And the radiation from that led to him getting leukemia. In 1955, he was diagnosed with leukemia, and he just gradually withered away and died in 1962 when he was 43 years old. But he kept writing up until like 6 weeks before he died. So I don't think his health issues are the reason the book never got published. Again, I have no idea. I can make a couple guesses, but I really don't know. So I wanted to get the Angelo Angelopoulos story out there as well because he was such a talented guy, and again has his own tragic story of a World War II pilot who gets leukemia. I once talked with Angelo's wife, and she said something like 9 of the 16 pilots who were involved in World War II over in Japan and would have flown over the country after the bombs were dropped got leukemia. The government acknowledged that. So he's got his own tragic story as well.
Longtime Indy sports writer Mark Monte is our guest. Mark, going back to Purdue for a second, and you've highlighted this a couple of times on Twitter the last week, how often does it get lost in the shuffle over this long run by Purdue, not just this tournament, but Matt Painter's tenure of his ability to recruit the state of Indiana?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it, that he's now dominating? Because, Jake could certainly attest to this, that for years, Bob Knight got whoever he wanted out of the state. The only 2 Purdue players I'm aware of that could have gone to IU were Glenn Robinson and Brandon Brantley, who's now on the Purdue staff. Some of these other guys, like Bob Knight took Delray Brooks, not Troy Lewis, for example. He got who he wanted out of the state. And now Matt, largely because of all the shuffle of IU coaches, inconsistency, and then, of course, Matt's own success, he's got a great relationship with the high school coaches in the state. He's now dominating the state and even Southern Indiana, getting guys out of Southern Indiana like Trey Kaufman-Wren. So that's unusual to see, and that's quite an accomplishment on his part, and it seems like it's going to continue for a while. Now, Mike Woodson, obviously, IU has gotten great players as well out of the state. Matt chased after Tyler Zeller like crazy. He went to his tennis matches trying to get Tyler Zeller, and if he gotten him, maybe he gets Cody too. I mean, he's come close on a lot of guys who would have really provided a boost for his program. So it's not like he gets whoever he wants, but he's certainly getting his share now, and that's kind of unusual. He's not getting leftovers like Gene Cady did in a lot of cases. So unusual situation that, it hasn't been like this, but the way Matt's program is set up with the guys he has coming in and the guys, on the bench now who will be back next year, it looks like he's going to have a really strong program for years to come.
And let's be honest, Mark, Glenn Robinson and Sean Kemp are 2 guys that at the time IU fans used to love to push out their chest saying, Coach Knight wouldn't have taken a guy like that. And Bob Knight would have absolutely ridden the Schwinn 10 speed to either Gary or Elkhart if it had a tandem seat to bring either of those guys back to Bloomington, right?
No question whatsoever. It's like every other coach, he wants talent,
And those guys, man, tell you what. Rex Chapman just had a really good thread about Sean Kemp and what a talent he was. Glenn Robinson was unbelievable and a great player for the Boilers, and one I'm sure that we'll be watching this weekend, hoping Purdue can get it done. Mark, we appreciate the time as always. I look forward to talking to you in May, notably when we do, and I don't know if we've even said this yet, but we will again do Beyond the Bricks in the month of May, and I have a feeling you will be on it talking about the book about Bill Vukovic as well. And thank you for the copy. And certainly, I know a lot of people are going to enjoy that. Thanks for the time today.
Okay, thank you, Jake.
All right, Mark Monteith joining us on the program. Again, markmonteith.com is his website. Rob Blackman is the radio play-by-play voice of the Purdue Boilermakers and is down in the Valley of the Sun and will join us in just a few. Halfway through the 2 o'clock hour here on a Friday. By the way, upcoming new segment that we will be doing each and every Friday, and I've told you about it, the Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, courtesy of Franciscan Health. Talking about a feel-good story in the world of sports. I will do it each and every Friday, something to get you started for the weekend where instead of hearing about everything in sports, and I will take submissions, if you will, from listeners on a story in your community in the world of sports, be it a high school athlete that's overcome the odds or something you witnessed that simply made your heart feel good. We are going to highlight those things each and every Friday, and I will do it coming up here after our conversation with Rob Blackman, the first installment of the Feel Good, Good for the Heart Fridays from Franciscan. But Rob Blackman is the radio voice of the Purdue Boilermakers. His heart probably right now swelling half the size of Arizona with the pride and the excitement of Purdue in the Final Four. And now 2 games from a national championship, but you take them one game at a time, and North Carolina State is the next on the schedule. Rob, how are you?
Good, Jake. Thank you. Good intro there. You're right. A lot of pride swelling around here, not just for our team, but for me personally. Although tomorrow that heart will probably be a flutter because I'll be nervous again. But for the moment, trying to enjoy every second of this.
You have been around, Rob, the team, obviously from day one. That goes without saying. The attitude, the confidence, the focus, is anything different today than it was a week or a month ago?
Well, I would say, and I've told a few folks this, the one thing that is really a lot different at this very second, and really it came about late Sunday night, early Sunday night, was I felt like this team finally had a chance to exhale and enjoy the moment. They have not had that opportunity this year. And look, it's their own doing. I mean, when you lose to a 16 seed the year prior, no matter what you do in the regular season, as you well know, Jake and Jimmy, it's not going to be enough. All anyone's going to say is, well, what about March Madness? What about the NCAA tournament? So Purdue had so many things, so many boxes that they were able to check this season from a standpoint of, look, we won the Maui Invitational, which was the best field ever in the history of Maui. The team was ranked in the top 5 all season long, never fell out of the top 5. Team won the Big Ten regular season championship. Team won, 33 games, more games than ever. And the list goes on and on. You never, ever felt like this team could actually enjoy any of it. There's this dark cloud hung over their head from last year's NCAA tournament loss to FDU. So I did feel that sense of exhale, that sense of thank goodness, we did it. We got to the Final Four. I felt that on Sunday night, and so that's been the biggest difference. I know it sounds crazy to say, especially for fans, but there just weren't a whole lot of – look, not like this team didn't have a fun season. They did. But you never felt like they could just embrace the moment and smile and laugh and just, say, hey, look at us. Pump your chest out and say, look at us. Because every time you tried to do that, someone would laugh and say, well, yeah, but what about FDU? Finally, that monkey is off the back, and it really feels like this team is actually enjoying what's going on right now.
Voice of the Boilermakers, Rob Blackman, is our guest. Rob, speaking of their focus, their drive, as it's been outlined throughout the season, but now that they're there, and you mentioned a brief exhale, but focus is back there now at hoisting the ultimate prize on Monday night. What have been your biggest takeaways from media availability and all the spectacle that it can be when you have so many different reporters and interviewers and just questions thrown their way? What, if anything, positive, funny, anything like that from the interactions that you've seen the media and this Purdue team this week?
Well, let's start with that word you used, Jimmy, spectacle, because it is a spectacle. This is my first opportunity at a Final Four. I've been with Purdue 19 years, and this is my first crack at doing something like this. The way these players and coaches, especially the head coach, the different directions that they are pulled on a daily basis is somewhat unbelievable. And now that I see kind of how it works behind the scenes, I have an even greater appreciation for the team that ultimately wins the championship every year. Because if it's always like this, I'm not sure how they're able to keep their focus and still be a national champion. I mean, there are media requests, it feels like, all day long for these guys. Now, that's not the truth. It's not all day long, but it certainly feels that way. For instance, we're going to have a shoot-around here in the building, the open shoot-around that fans can watch.
here in about 25 minutes or so. Purdue will take the court for roughly an hour. But we've been here for 90 minutes, almost 2 hours already, because of media availability that you have to do. By the way, this is not optional. The NCAA makes you do this. So these guys, you're up early, at least early for Pacific Coast time, as we are here in Phoenix. So you're up early. You come to the arena. You sit around for 2 hours. You answer the same question over and over and over again. You try to be respectful because, look, you understand that the folks that are covering you now, we're not covering you earlier in the season. So they're asking the same questions you heard back in November from folks that are with you every single day. So, yeah, it is sorry I'm being long-winded here, but like yesterday, there were media obligations beforehand. Then Purdue had a 90-minute closed practice here at the State Farm Center, State Farm Stadium, rather. And then they had more media obligations an hour or so after that. My point being, it really is some long days for these guys. There's not a lot of downtime, not a lot of chances for them to kick their feet up and relax a little bit. But with that said, I don't think anybody's complaining. I mean, if this is the downside of being in the Final Four, then you know what? That's not all that bad.
Zach Edey is picking up Player of the Year awards by the minute, essentially. He's going to win all of them. He just won the AP award today. And Rob, this is not unfamiliar territory for him, but has there been any change in terms of approach, focus, blinders, earmuffs, to use Chuck Pagano's terms, in Zach Edey last year to this year?
Not that I have seen. His demeanor, his disposition, and I don't know if it's the way his parents raised him or maybe it's just genetics, but this guy seems to be wired for this particular moment. I know people always talk about, well, you don't get too high, you don't get too low. That's kind of how Zach Edey is. If you ever listen to him speak in the media, he doesn't really provide any bulletin board material. He doesn't really provide much of anything at all. He's just kind of, hey, I'm here to play basketball. Let me come in here. Let me get my work done. Let me help this team win a game, and then I'll move on and move on to the next day. It's really just how he's wired. I haven't noticed a whole lot of difference from that aspect. I do know this. I spoke with Brandon Brantley, who's our big man coach, and he was telling me earlier this morning, I didn't even know this, that the one thing, Zach, from a physical standpoint, was really on Coach Brantley about this past offseason was, I want to get better defensively, and I want my footwork to get better on the defensive end, and I want to be better scouting teams defensively. So for all the monster numbers that he has put up offensively this year, his biggest concern in the offseason was getting better defensively, of all things. And part of that is because that's the feedback he got from the NBA last year when he tested the NBA waters. So physically, skill-wise, he has gotten better defensively. I think there's no doubt about that. But from an attitude or from a demeanor standpoint, I will say this for Zach Edey, and I don't profess to know Zach well. I mean, I'm 53 years old. He's 22 or whatever it is. So we don't have a lot in common. So it's not like he and I sit around and shoot the breeze much. But since the moment he stepped on campus as a freshman, he's been the same dude. Whether he was playing off the bench behind Travion Williams, getting 19 minutes a game, or National Player of the Year back-to-back years. He's always just kind of been the same old Zach. So, and that probably suits him well, especially in an environment like this.
Purdue basketball voice Rob Blackman joins us. Rob, speaking of Zach Edey, and in terms of the NC State matchup, there's not been a ton of bulletin board material, and I know the pushback to this question is, well, has DJ Burns faced anybody like Zach Edey? But the only real nugget, and I don't even think it was a dish, it was just a confidence comment by Burns. The only real nugget I've seen this week is DJ Burns told the media that he believes that Purdue's Zach Edey has not faced a big like him in this run. I would agree with that in this run of the tournament, not in totality of the season, but this particular run of March Madness. From your seat, do you see it that way as well? And what are you most excited about with the matchup of those two bigs?
Yeah, so and I also heard that same comment, saw that same comment. I'm with you, Jimmy. I don't necessarily know if that was bulletin board material. He was just, saying, hey, he hasn't seen a guy like me, and there's a lot of truth to that. I would say Travion Williams would be about as close to a DJ Burns that Purdue has had, and certainly he was on campus for 2 years when Zach was here. But this matchup, and Matt Painter talks about this all the time, there are games where Purdue has played these last 2 seasons especially where it's not been a good matchup for Zach on the defensive end. Just have it. There are folks that can give him trouble. Rink Mast at Nebraska is a great example of that. Just very difficult for Zach to guard on the defensive end. However, as Coach Painter has pointed out early and often, the flip side to that is we still do have Zach on the offensive end, and you have to find a way to stop him. It's not like he only has to play on one end of the floor here. Yes, you might be able to get over on him a little bit here or there, but we're going to come right back at you at the other end. We're going to throw it in there to that guy and see if you can slow him down. So this, yes, certainly, I understand the national narrative is Burns versus Edey, and it's a good narrative. I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup as well. But I would also argue that so often, as you gentlemen know, we spend so much time hyping up what we think is going to be the matchup of the day, and it never ends up turning out that way. It's always something that we didn't see coming, and that may be guard play or three-point shooting. I have no idea, but without question, it's going to be fun to watch because you're both in this instance. Both teams are correct. DJ Burns is a really, really tough matchup for Zach Edey on the defensive end, and Zach Edey is a really, really tough matchup, I should say, for DJ Burns on the other end.
Oftentimes, Rob Blackman, the voice of the Boilers, is our guest. Oftentimes in the Final Four, teams have dominant players. And then when they win the national title, it's almost a season-long unheralded guy that rises to the occasion and takes the most outstanding player award and is the centerpiece. Donald Williams in North Carolina. Yeah. Michael Graham at Georgetown. If that were to happen for Purdue, the guy that you could see, the one that is going to walk into Harry's in 25 years and people are going to go, there's the hero, the 24 Final Four is who?
Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think, is the easy answer. When he has been at his best, especially on the offensive end, Purdue, quite frankly, has been unbeatable. We saw that against Utah State there in Indianapolis 2 weekends ago. You think back to the way that second half started. Purdue ran its first 4 plays of the second half for Trey Kaufman-Renn, not for Zach Edey, for Trey Kaufman-Renn. He fumbled the first one. Remember, he fell down. They pulled the chair out from under him. He turned it over and then scored on the next 3 and really set the tone for that second half for Purdue to just kind of run Utah State out of the building. I would argue he would be the X factor here. So much attention is paid to Zach Edey and Purdue's guard play. Braden Smith is an All-American honorable mention here. He's first-team All-League. Fletcher Lawyer obviously gets his due, and so does Lance Jones. The forgotten guy in all of this here has been really all season long, Trey Kaufman-Renn. So if he plays at a high level, especially offensively, he could certainly be the hero of this thing for Purdue, no doubt about it.
Rob, I know that Braden Smith will have butterflies. I know Zach Edey will have butterflies. I know Matt Painter will have butterflies. I know Rob Blackman won't because he's going to say, you know what, it's just like walking up and down pit road on the broadcast of the Indianapolis 500, baby. Let's go. And we look forward to the call, and we look forward to hearing you make calls on Monday as well, hopefully, right?
Oh, I hope that, man, do I hope that's the case, Jake. Yeah, and thank you and Jimmy for having me on, man. It's been a whirlwind of a week. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes.
Heck of a call, Rob, by the way, to punch the Final Four ticket. That was great stuff.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Hopefully many more, Rob. We appreciate it.
Okay, guys, thanks.
All right, Rob
Bye-bye.
Blackman from Arizona, the voice of the Purdue Boilermakers. And you can bet, I mentioned, hearts will be a-fluttering, right, when Purdue takes to the tip. That leads us, by the way, to a segment that we're going to do each and every Friday for the remainder of the year. And I'd like to thank Franciscan Health for making that possible. The Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. You know, folks, you've heard me mention it a lot, that when I had a heart attack, I walked out of the hospital and thought to myself, I just feel like, and I think those who have survived a heart attack know what I'm talking about. There's a bit of a survivor guilt, and you realize, I don't know why I made it through that, but I have a responsibility now to make sure that other people don't. And I kind of made a vow to myself that if I got a radio job again, because I didn't have one at the time, that I was going to try to just bring a little bit more positivity to the world of sports, because I think so often, especially in sports talk radio, a lot of times it's just people yelling at you. And I thought, let's do something different where at least once a week we can have something where people listen to something and go, that's a good story. And I would love over the course of the year to start getting in the habit where people are sending me and nominating their young people or their stories in their community that simply made them feel good. Like, for example, the one I'm about to tell. Now, Owen Carr's story in Avon is well documented by now. It was written about in the local paper. It's been, as a matter of fact, featured on national television before the NCAA tournament. But I wanted to advance the story a little bit in letting you know what's going on with Owen. Owen is better known as O. He's the Oriole mascot for Avon High School, but it was a long and treacherous road to get there. When he was born, he had lung and digestive complications. He was put on a vent at just the age of 5 months old and given a feeding tube. That led to an eye disease where he lost hearing in his right ear. He also lost some vision because of the eye disease. And he was on a vent until he was 4 years old. Went off of a vent at 4 years old, kind of went on and off with the being on a vent, and had mild cerebral palsy. He also was diagnosed as a youngster with a slight case of autism. So there were a lot of developmental delays for Owen Carr. But he had within him a spirit, and he had within him a desire to make life better for other people. When he was a youngster, they brought in some mascot animals to his school that scared him, and he wanted to overcome that fear because Owen, of course, is used to overcoming things. So he asked if he could actually go up and touch one of the mascots. He did that to overcome the fear, and by the time he was in middle school, he asked if he could actually be the mascot for the sports teams at school. And thus, O was born, which became a beloved part of the Avon High School experience for people going to games, including kids that love to go up, get their picture taken with O. And when Owen gets inside of that outfit, suddenly the personality comes out. As a matter of fact, he told his parents that sometimes you got to stand out in order to fit in. And he was just a kid that wanted to fit in. Well, the mascot became a beloved thing, and as a result of that, his desire was to meet the mascot at Florida State because that mascot actually rides a live horse, which is what Owen did as part of his physical therapy as a youngster. He rides horses regularly now, but he loved that Florida State mascot. And when his story got out, he got the opportunity to travel to a couple of different universities here in his senior year of high school. He has been to Clemson. That's correct. He's run the hill. He met the Tiger there. He's met the Louisville Cardinal. And coming up in September, he will be a welcomed guest at Florida State University, where Osceola and the Renegade, the mascot, the live mascot, and horse, he will be able to fulfill his dream of riding. Mostly, he said he simply wants to spread cheer, and spark joy, and that's why Owen Carr got together with his parents and decided to do a summer camp for mascots and aspiring mascots for grades 4 through 11 kids, and notably kids that might have a disability that are overcoming challenges like Owen. And this might be an opportunity for them to be the mascot for their school and to spread that same cheer that Owen does each and every day and overcoming the odds. A young guy that was up against it from day one and now absolutely thrives. June 17th through the 19th at Crossroads Church in Avon is where his camp will take place for kids grades 4 through 11 with Owen's vision of making everybody have that opportunity to be that mascot and spread their wings like the Oriole has done. It's a feel-good story. It's one that continues. He's going to graduate soon, but he is going to hand over the mascot uniform to somebody else and allow others to learn from those that he has overcome. We'll let you know what happens when he goes down in September to meet the Florida State mascot. It's a feel-good story all the way around, and I wanted to bring it to you courtesy of Franciscan Health. And did you know, by the way, that when it comes to heart health, sometimes the stories aren't always so feel good. Heart disease continues to be the number one cause of death in men and women in the United States. But screening and finding out what can be preventative in terms of preventing a heart attack like the one that I had is really not very difficult to do. Men and women over 40 who have at least one risk factor of heart disease, that be high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, current or a former smoker, or if you have a family history like I did of heart disease, then you can qualify for a heart scan at Franciscan Health. These are very easy to do. They're non-invasive, and they are affordable. Franciscan is the #1 heart program in Indiana for cardiology by health grades, #1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery by CareChecks. Franciscan Health offers an affordable heart scan for just $49, and you are able to self-refer, pay out of pocket, and a free heart health risk assessment is included with every screening. You cannot afford to not get the scan. Get more time on the clock for yourself and do what I did in making sure that you are becoming heart healthy. You don't want to wait until it's too late, like it kind of nearly was for me. I hope that sharing my experience, you'll take your health seriously and schedule a heart scan today. As always, when it comes to telling me a feel-good story or finding out more about how you can become heart healthy, I strongly encourage you. Simply text me if you'd like, 317-523-9288. Any questions you have, 317-523-9288. And any stories that are making your heart feel good within your community, let me know those as well. Go to 1075thefan.com and register to win.
Jay Cook plays of the day.
This is me, all right? I'm not a athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day extended into the weekend as well. Pacers Thunder tonight, give me over 30.5 total points plus assists for Tyrese Halliburton. In the Final Four on Saturday, lay the 9 with Purdue, lay 11.5 with UConn. Additionally, if you're looking for a futures bet, you can get Purdue to win the whole thing for plus 205. I'll do that as well. Eddie, any plays from you?
No, sir.
Those are your plays of the day.
That's it?
That's all you got.
Okay. By the way, just confirmed in the last 10 seconds, Gene Katie will join us on the program on Monday. So we will have Gene Katie on the show. Brian Walker, I think, is also going to join us, former Purdue Boilermaker, and we will be Monday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Eclipse. So we will be in Pagoda Plaza. I've got a feeling it's going to be a very Purdue-heavy show because not only is that a Purdue-partnered event at IMS, because, of course, when you think about the moon, you think about the first guy to walk on it, Neil Armstrong, who is a Boiler, and there is the high likelihood – I shouldn't say that. I don't want to jinx anything. There's the possibility still that Purdue will be playing for a national championship on Monday night.
I'll guarantee it today. They're going to be there in the national championship. Guaranteeing it.
I would not.
Guaranteeing it firmly.
Okay. Purdue has another game to play, and if they win it, they will play in the national championship game on Monday against North Carolina State on Saturday.
I'm laying the 9 on the Boilermakers.
Eddie, your thoughts on the game?
I think it'll be a good game. I think Purdue will run away late like they did in their most recent game against Tennessee. I'm fascinated by the DJ Burns matchup against Zach Edey. Will DJ Burns be able to play a big workload of minutes to help neutralize Edey a little bit? That's the big question I have. But other than that, I think Purdue wins, and I think they'll be in control for most of the game and then pull away late in the second half.
The first and most recent men to walk on the moon, both Boilermakers. And look, I think that North Carolina State, it is true that oftentimes a team of destiny that makes a Cinderella run to get to the Final Four, midnight strikes quickly once those games happen. But I do think that, Burns is a good player and he's active. And could he get Edey in foul trouble? Kaufman-Renn then becomes important. It would seem as though Purdue's depth is going to be enough for them. The one thing you've got to be careful of is that they haven't overlooked and are automatically penciling in Connecticut, which is going to be a difficult matchup if Connecticut is to beat Alabama. I don't think Purdue has that sort of the lack of focus about them. But it's a Final Four, and that's what's fun about it. Sometimes in the Final Four, the least expected happens, and that's what makes it fun. But it's going to be a lot of fun at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I know that it's going to be a crazy day on Monday with everything going on. We look forward to being part of it. You guys have a great weekend, all right? Enjoy the Final Four.
Thanks, Jake. You too.
JMV is up next. He's at District Tap. Kevin and I are there from 8 to 10 tonight. We will see you there. Thanks for listening.
The Ride with JM.